My daughter died 5 years ago. Every year since that terrible day, I handed her husband an envelope containing $50,000 in cash. I told myself it was to take care of my granddaughter, to pay for her private school, to keep her safe in a world that had already taken her mother. I thought I was being a good provider. I thought I was honoring my daughter's memory. Then one freezing Tuesday in November, my 10-year-old granddaughter grabbed my sleeve at the cemetery. Her fingers dug into my arm with a desperation that no child should ever know. She pulled me down to her level and whispered words that stopped my heart. "Grandpa, please do not send Dad any more money. Just follow him." You will see. What I discovered next did not just terrify me. It unleashed a war. My name is Alvin Mercer. I am 68 years old. Most people in this city look at me and see a retired railroad man, a guy with grease permanently stained into his fingernails and a back stiff from 40 years of laying track and fixing engines for Union Pacific. They see my 2004 Ford pickup truck with the rusted wheel wells and the dent in the bumper. They see my faded Carhartt jacket and my worn-out work boots. They assume I am just scraping by on a pension, counting pennies at the grocery store. I never correct them. I learned a long time ago that in Chicago, silence is the best security system you can buy. I do not tell people about the 300 acres of land in Georgia my grandfather left me, land that was worthless swamp until a developer needed it for a highway expansion. I do not tell them about the investments I made when everyone else was buying fancy cars. I live quiet. I live simple, but I have resources. And for the last 5 years, I have poured those resources into the hands of a man I never trusted, all for the sake of the little girl who has my daughter's eyes. It was the 5th anniversary of Tiana's death. The wind off Lake Michigan was cutting through the cemetery like a knife. The sky was that flat, bruised gray that promises snow. I stood in front of the granite headstone, clearing away dead leaves with my gloved hands. Tiana Mercer Anderson, beloved mother and wife. She was 32 when she passed. A brain aneurysm. Quick, brutal, unfair. One minute she was laughing on the phone with me, telling me about a promotion she wanted at the logistics firm. The next, she was gone. I heard the crunch of gravel behind me. I did not have to turn around to know who it was. The engine purr gave it away. My truck rumbles and coughs. The vehicle behind me hummed with the expensive silence of German engineering. I straightened up, my knees popping in the cold, and turned to face them. Blake Anderson climbed out of a brand new black Range Rover. He is a tall man, white, 38 years old, with the kind of face you see on real estate billboards. He was wearing a long cashmere coat that probably cost more than my first car. He adjusted his leather gloves and put on a face of practiced mourning. It was a performance. I knew it. I had watched him perform for 5 years. He walked toward me, his shoes crunching on the frozen ground. They were Italian leather, polished to a shine that reflected the gray clouds. "Hello, Alvin," he said. His voice was smooth, deep, the voice of a man who sells dreams for a living. He claims to be an architect with his own firm. He claims business is booming, but cash flow is tight. He claims a lot of things. "Hello, Blake," I said. I kept my hands in my pockets. I did not offer a handshake. I looked past him to the passenger side of the Range Rover. The door opened slowly. Sophie stepped out. My granddaughter. My heart clenched in my chest. She is 10 years old now, but she looked smaller. She looked fragile. She has Tiana's dark curls and my complexion, but her spirit seemed faded, like a photograph left in the sun too long. She walked toward us with her head down. It was 20 degrees out, but she was wearing a thin denim jacket that looked 2 sizes too small. The sleeves barely reached her wrists. She was shivering, but it was not the jacket that made my blood run cold. It was her feet. She was wearing a pair of pink sneakers. They were filthy. The fabric near the pinky toe on the left foot was torn wide open, exposing her sock to the wet snow. The rubber soles were peeling away at the front, flapping slightly with every step she took. I looked from her feet to Blake's shining Italian leather boots. Then I looked at the $50,000 SUV idling behind them. The heat was blasting inside that car. I could see the condensation on the windows. Blake saw me looking. He stepped between me and Sophie, blocking my view of her shoes. "She refuses to wear the new boots I bought her," Blake said quickly, flashing a pained smile. You know how kids are, Alvin. She is sentimental. She loves those old things. She throws a tantrum if I try to make her dress properly. It is a battle I just did not have the energy to fight today. Not today. Liar. I knew it instantly. Sophie was the most well-behaved child I had ever known. Tiana raised her to be respectful, to take care of her things. Tantrums were not in her nature. But I did not say anything. Not yet. I had to stick to the routine. I reached into the inside pocket of my work jacket and pulled out a thick white envelope. It contained $50,000 in $100 bills, bank certified, untraceable if you did not want it traced. This was our arrangement. Blake had told me 5 years ago that Tiana's life insurance had lapsed. He told me the private school Tiana wanted for Sophie, the Saint, Jude Academy, cost $40,000 a year. He told me he was struggling to keep the house, to keep Sophie's life stable, so I stepped up. I told him I would handle the tuition and expenses. I told him I would bring cash every year on the anniversary to honor Tiana. Here, I said, extending the envelope, for Sophie's tuition and her care. Blake's eyes shifted. For a split second, the mask of the grieving widower slipped. I saw greed, naked, hungry greed. He reached out and snatched the envelope a little too quickly. He felt the weight of it. He did not look at Tiana's grave. He did not look at his daughter. He looked at the packet in his hand. "Thanks, Alvin," he said, tucking it into his cashmere coat. "Tuition went up again this year. Inflation, you know? And the house needs a new roof. This barely covers it, but we will make do. We always do." "You make sure she gets a winter coat," I said, my voice low and hard. "A real one. Today." Blake waved a hand dismissively. Of course. We are going shopping right after this. I just need to take a call. My foreman is having issues at a job site. Excuse me for a moment." He turned his back on us and walked toward the tree line, pulling out the latest iPhone. He started talking, his voice hushed and urgent. He was not talking to a foreman. I spent 40 years on job sites. You do not whisper to foremen. You yell at them. I took the opportunity. I dropped to one knee on the frozen ground, ignoring the pop in my joints. "Sophie, baby, come here," I said softly. She took a hesitant step toward me. She looked toward her father's back, checking to see if he was watching. He was busy laughing into the phone. She rushed into my arms. She smelled like stale laundry detergent and something else. Hunger. She felt thin under that cheap denim jacket. I could feel her ribs when I hugged her. I pulled back and looked at her face. Her skin was dry and ashy from the cold. There were dark circles under her eyes. "Let me see your shoe," I said. She lifted her foot. It was worse than I thought. The sole was held on by a piece of duct tape that was peeling off. Her sock was wet. "Sophie," I said, trying to keep the rage out of my voice so I would not scare her. "Why didn't your daddy buy you boots? I gave him money for clothes last month." She did not answer. She just bit her lip and looked down. "Sophie, look at me. Is he feeding you?" She nodded, but it was a small, jerky motion. Then she saw Blake turn around by the trees. He was putting his phone away. Panic flared in her eyes. It was a look of pure terror that no 10-year-old should ever have. She grabbed my wrist. Her fingernails were long and jagged, like no one had cut them in weeks. She dug them into my skin, hurting me. She pulled me close, her lips brushing my ear. "Grandpa," she whispered, the words rushing out in a terrified stream. "Please, do not send Dad any more money. He does not spend it on me. He does not spend it on the house." "What?" I whispered back. "Sophie, where does the money go?" She shook her head violently. "Just follow him, Grandpa. Please, don't go home. Follow him when we leave. You will see. You will see everything." "Sophie!" Blake's voice boomed across the cemetery. It wasn't the smooth architect voice anymore. It was sharp, angry. "Get in the car. Now. We're late." Sophie flinched as if she had been struck. She let go of my arm and backed away. "I love you, Grandpa," she mouthed silently. Then she turned and ran to the Range Rover. She scrambled into the back seat and closed the door. Blake walked back to me. He was smiling again, but his eyes were cold, hard as flint. "Sorry about that, Alvin," he said. "She is moody today. Misses her mom, I guess. We have to run. I have a client meeting in the city. Thanks again for the help." He patted his coat pocket where my $50,000 sat. He did not even look at the tombstone of the woman who made his life possible. He turned on his heel, got into the driver's seat, and revved the engine. I stood there in the cold wind, watching them drive away. The taillights of the Range Rover were two red eyes disappearing toward the exit gates. I looked down at my wrist. There were 4 small crescent moon indentations where Sophie's nails had dug in. They were turning red. I thought about the last 5 years. I thought about the $250,000 I had handed over. I thought about Blake's excuses, the roof repairs that never happened, the private tutors I never met, the medical bills for allergies Sophie never used to have. I thought about the duct tape on my granddaughter's shoe. A rage started in my belly. It was not a hot, fiery anger. It was cold. It was the kind of cold that freezes iron until it shatters. It was the cold of the railroad tracks in January. I am a patient man. You have to be patient to work on the rails. You wait for the right switch. You wait for the signal, E. But when the train starts moving, nothing stops it. I walked to my truck. I climbed into the cab. The seat was torn vinyl, and the heater took 10 minutes to kick in. I put the key in the ignition, and the engine rumbled to life with a familiar shake. Usually, I would turn left out of the cemetery, head back to my small bungalow on the south side, heat up a can of soup, and watch the news. That was my life. Quiet, invisible, but not today. I shifted the truck into gear. I did not turn left. I turned right, following the fresh tire tracks of the Range Rover in the light dusting of snow. Blake Anderson thought I was just a senile old ATM machine. He thought I was a broken-down old man grieving his daughter, too blind to see the truth. He thought he could drive away with my money and leave my granddaughter shivering in the cold. He was about to find out that he had made a fatal miscalculation. I kept my distance, 2 cars back, just like I learned from watching those detective shows Tiana used to love. The Range Rover merged onto the highway, heading toward downtown Chicago, toward the loop, toward the money. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. "Just follow him," she had said. I pressed the gas pedal. The old Ford groaned, but it surged forward. "I am coming, Sophie," I whispered to the empty cab. "I am coming." Blake Anderson was driving fast, weaving through traffic with the arrogance of a man who thinks the world owes him the right of way. He was heading straight for the heart of the city. He wasn't going to a job site. Architects don't visit job sites in cashmere coats at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. I checked my fuel gauge. Full tank. I checked my wallet. I had my emergency cash. I was not going home today. The skyline of Chicago rose up ahead, steel and glass glittering in the cold sun. Somewhere in that concrete jungle, my son-in-law was hiding a secret, and I was going to tear this city apart brick by brick until I found it. Before this day was over, I would know exactly where my $50,000 went, and God help Blake Anderson when I found out. Because the old railroad man was not just watching anymore. He was hunting. The Kennedy Expressway into downtown Chicago is not a road. It is a river of steel and frustration. Blake Anderson drove his black Range Rover like he was the only captain on the water. He wove in and out of lanes without signaling. He cut off a minivan full of children. He accelerated into gaps that barely existed. I stayed 3 cars back in the right lane. My old Ford pickup rattled as I pushed it past 60 miles an hour, but I held the line. You learn a lot about a man by how he drives. Blake drove with entitlement. He thought the rules of the road were suggestions for other people. I drove with the steady hand of a man who used to guide 2,000 tons of freight train through the night. You do not make sudden moves on the rails. You watch the signals. You anticipate the curves. I kept his taillights in my vision like a beacon. He took the exit toward the loop, sliding across 3 lanes of traffic at the last second. I forced my truck over, ignoring the honking of a taxi driver who threw a hand up in my window. I did not care. I was locked on. We plunged into the shadows of the city canyons. The skyscrapers rose up around us, blocking out the winter sun. This was his world, the world of glass offices and $10 coffees. I was an alien here in my grease-stained Carhartt jacket, but I did not let him go. He turned onto Wacker Drive, following the river. Then he made a sharp right into the entrance of a building that looked like a needle of glass piercing the sky. The Elysium Tower. I knew this place. It was one of those buildings where a 1-bedroom apartment cost more than my entire pension fund. Blake stopped at the resident gate. I pulled over to the curb 50 feet back and killed the engine. I watched him roll down his window and tap a key card. The heavy iron gate slid open. He glided through. I had to get in there. The gate was closing. I could not ram it. That would bring the police too soon. I needed to see what he was doing. I needed to see where my money was going. I looked at the guard booth. A young man in a uniform that was too big for him was sitting there staring at his phone. I reached into my glove box. I dug past the tire pressure gauge and the old napkins until I found it. My old Union Pacific identification badge. It was expired by 3 years, but it had a gold hologram and looked official enough if you did not look too close. I grabbed a clipboard I used for tracking mileage. I clipped a random piece of paper to it. I stepped out of the truck. The wind whipped down the street, stinging my face. I walked straight to the pedestrian entrance next to the gate. I did not hesitate. If you act like you belong somewhere, people assume you do. The young guard looked up as I approached. He started to open the window. I held up the badge and the clipboard before he could speak. Railroad Safety Commission. I barked, my voice gruff as gravel. We have reports of vibration damage to your foundation from the subway line. I need to check the structural pillars in the lower garage. Now. The kid blinked. He looked at the gold hologram. He looked at my hard face. He did not get paid enough to argue with a city inspector. He buzzed the door open. Thank you, son, I muttered and walked through. I was inside. The air in the parking garage was warmer than the street. It smelled of polished concrete and expensive rubber. I walked down the ramp, my work boots echoing in the silence. I kept to the shadows moving between the concrete pillars. I found the black Range Rover on the second level. It was parked in a spot marked Reserved Penthouse 4. The engine was still ticking as it cooled down. Blake was not in the car. I scanned the garage. There, by the elevator bank. Blake was standing there, but he was not alone. He was waiting for the elevator doors to open. Standing next to him was a woman. She was white, tall, and slender. She had hair the color of spun gold that fell down her back in perfect waves. She was wearing a white fur coat that looked soft enough to sleep on. She was beautiful in the way a diamond is beautiful, cold and sharp. This was not a client. This was not a colleague. Blake reached out and pulled her close by the waist. His hand slid down to her hip with a familiarity that made bile rise in my throat. She laughed, throwing her head back. It was a laugh of pure, unadulterated joy. Then I saw what was at their feet. Shopping bags. Dozens of them. They were piled around their legs like offerings at a shrine. The bags were glossy and thick with names I recognized from the commercials Tiana used to watch. Gucci, Louis Vuitton, Saks Fifth Avenue. One bag had spilled over. I saw a flash of red silk, a scarf maybe, or a dress. The elevator doors chimed and slid open. Blake picked up 4 bags in each hand. The woman grabbed the rest. They stepped inside the private elevator. The doors closed, swallowing them up. I stood frozen in the shadow of a concrete pillar. My hands were shaking not from the cold, but from a rage so hot it felt like it was burning my skin off. That was my money. That was the $50,000 I had handed him 2 hours ago. That was the money for Sophie's tuition. That was the money for the roof repair. That was the money to keep my granddaughter safe. He had not gone to a job site. He had not gone to pay bills. He had gone shopping. I stared at the digital numbers above the elevator as they climbed. 10, 20, 30, 40, penthouse. I leaned against the cold concrete of the pillar and closed my eyes. A memory hit me hard enough to knock the wind out of me. It was 7 years ago. Tiana was sitting at my kitchen table. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and there were gray hairs appearing at her temples, even though she was only 30. She was working 3 jobs. She was a logistics coordinator. During the day, she waited tables at night, and she did freelance data entry on the weekends. Daddy, she had said to me, her voice thin and brittle. Blake has this big idea. He wants to start his own architecture firm. He is a genius, Daddy, he really is. He just needs capital. He needs me to support us for a while until he gets his first big contract. I have to work harder, Daddy. I have to do this for him, for us. I had told her to slow down. I had told her Blake should get a job, any job to help, but she refused. She believed in him. She worked herself into the ground for him. And then the aneurysm happened. The doctor said it was stress. He said her blood pressure was too high for too long. He said she pushed her body past its breaking point. I opened my eyes in the dim garage. I looked at the empty elevator doors. Blake had not just failed to support her. He had watched her work herself to death while he played the visionary. And now, 5 years after she died, he was spending the money she bled for on a woman in a white fur coat. He was not struggling. He was not a grieving widower trying to keep his head above water. He was living in a penthouse in the sky while his daughter walked through the snow in broken shoes. I walked over to the Range Rover. I looked through the tinted window. In the back seat there was a booster seat for Sophie. It was covered in crumbs and old wrappers. Next to it was a dog cage. It was empty, but it looked too small for any animal. I took my phone out of my pocket. I took a picture of the license plate. I took a picture of the reserved spot number. I walked to the elevator and took a picture of the directory that listed B. Anderson PH4. I had seen enough. If I stayed any longer, I would do something that would put me in jail, and I could not help Sophie from a cell. I turned and walked back up the ramp. My boots felt heavy like they were made of lead. I walked past the young guard in the booth. He did not even look up. I got back into my truck. The cab was freezing. I sat there for a long time staring at the glass tower. "You killed her," I whispered. "You killed my Tiana with your greed, and now you are killing her daughter." I started the engine. I did not turn toward home. I turned the truck toward the north side, toward the address of the St. Jude Academy, the school Blake claimed Sophie attended. I needed to know how deep the lie went. I needed to know if there was any part of his story that was true. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the city. The lights of the skyline began to flicker on. Up there in the penthouse, Blake and his blonde woman were probably drinking champagne and laughing about the stupid old railroad man who gave them free money. "Laugh while you can, Blake," I said, shifting the truck into gear. "Laugh while you can, because the train is coming and you are standing right on the tracks." The sun rose over Chicago on Wednesday morning, but it brought no warmth. I had spent the night in my truck parked 2 blocks away from the Elysium Tower watching the lights of the penthouse. I saw them go out at 3 in the morning. I imagined Blake and his blonde woman sleeping in silk sheets, while my granddaughter slept on a booster seat in a cold car, or worse. I did not sleep. I drank black coffee from a thermos and let the anger harden into cast iron in my gut. At 8 o'clock sharp, I pulled up to the wrought iron gates of the St. Jude Academy. It was on the north side, in a neighborhood where the lawns were manicured with nail scissors and the police cars were always shiny. The school looked like a castle. It had stone walls covered in ivy and a long circular driveway filled with expensive SUVs dropping off children in uniforms that cost more than my monthly grocery bill. I parked my rusted Ford right in front of the main entrance between a Mercedes and a Lexus. I ignored the dirty looks from the soccer moms. I walked up the stone steps, my boots heavy on the pavement. I pushed open the heavy oak doors and stepped into a lobby that smelled of floor wax and old money. A receptionist with glasses on a chain around her neck looked up at me. She did not smile. "Can I help you? Sir, deliveries are around the back." "I am not a delivery man," I said, my voice flat. "I am Alvin Mercer. I am here to speak to the headmaster about my granddaughter, Sophie Anderson." She blinked. "Do you have an appointment?" I slammed my hand down on the polished mahogany desk. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet room. 2 mothers in the corner jumped. "I do not need an appointment," I said. "I have paid $200,000 to this school over the last 5 years. That buys me 5 minutes. Get the headmaster, now." She picked up the phone, her hands shaking. 2 minutes later, a man in a gray suit walked out of the inner office. He looked like a politician, smooth and guarded. "Mr. Mercer, I am Principal Vance," he said, extending a hand. I ignored it. "Please come in." I followed him into his office. It was lined with books that looked like they had never been read. I sat in a leather chair that swallowed me whole. "I want to see her grades," I said, cutting straight to the chase. "I want to see her attendance record. I want to know why she looks like a skeleton and why she is wearing shoes held together with duct tape when I pay full tuition every November." Principal Vance sat behind his desk. He folded his hands. He looked uncomfortable, but not for the reasons I thought. "Mr. Mercer," he said slowly, "I think there has been a misunderstanding. Sophie Anderson is not a student here." The room went silent. The only sound was the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. "What did you say?" I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Sophie Anderson is not a student at St. Jude Academy," Principal Vance repeated. "She was withdrawn from enrollment 3 years ago." 3 years. The words hung in the air. "Why?" I asked. The principal sighed. He opened a file drawer and pulled out a thin folder. He slid a paper across the desk toward me. "Non-payment of tuition," he said. "Mr. Anderson was given multiple grace periods. We tried to work with him because Sophie was a bright girl. But after 2 semesters of missed payments, we had no choice. He was notified. He came in personally to sign the withdrawal papers. He said he was homeschooling her. I looked at the document. There it was. Blake's signature. Dated 3 years ago. I felt a roar in my ears like a train jumping the tracks. I paid him, I said. I handed him cash. $50,000 every single year. Principal Vance looked at me with pity. That was the worst part. The pity. We never received a dime, Mr. Mercer, he said. Mr. Anderson told us the family funds had dried up. He told us he was destitute. I stood up. I felt dizzy. The room was spinning. Destitute. Blake had stood in this office claiming poverty while he drove a Range Rover and lived in a penthouse. He had taken my money, my blood money I saved from 40 years of sweating in the rail yards, and he had put it in his pocket. And he had pulled Sophie out of the only stability she had. Where is she? I asked. Where did he transfer her records? Principal Vance looked at the file again. The records were requested by the district public school system, he said. Lincoln Elementary. It is on the west side. I knew Lincoln Elementary. It was in a neighborhood where the police sirens never stopped. It was a place where dreams went to die. I walked out of the office without another word. I walked past the receptionist. I walked past the rich mothers. I got into my truck and slammed the door so hard the window rattled. I drove west. The scenery changed fast. The manicured lawns disappeared. The stone castles turned into crumbling brick tenements. The shiny SUVs were replaced by cars with mismatched doors and plastic over the windows. The streets were filled with trash. Lincoln Elementary looked like a prison. It was a square block of gray concrete surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. There was no ivy here. There was only graffiti and the smell of exhaust. It was lunchtime. The schoolyard was a slab of cracked asphalt. There were hundreds of children running, screaming, fighting. I parked across the street. I pulled my hat down low. I scanned the crowd. It took me 10 minutes to find her. Sophie was sitting alone on a concrete bench near the fence. She was not playing. She was not running. She was huddled inside that thin denim jacket, trying to make herself as small as possible. I grabbed the pair of binoculars I keep in the glove box for bird watching. I focused on her. She was eating. In her hand, she held a single slice of white bread. It was dry. There was no meat, no cheese, just bread. She took small bites, chewing slowly like she was trying to make it last. My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. $50,000 a year. And my granddaughter was eating dry bread in the freezing cold. Then I saw the boys. 3 of them. They were older, maybe 12 or 13. They were wearing expensive sneakers and puffer jackets. They walked up to the bench. One of them kicked Sophie's foot, the foot with the broken shoe and the duct tape. I saw Sophie flinch. She pulled her legs in. She did not look up. She kept her eyes on the ground. The boy laughed. He said something I could not hear, but I saw the other boys laugh too. He kicked her foot again, harder this time. She dropped the bread. It fell into a puddle of dirty water on the asphalt. Sophie looked at the ruined food. She did not cry. She just stared at it. It was the look of someone who is used to losing things. The look of someone who expects the world to be cruel. One of the boys grabbed the sleeve of her jacket. He yanked it. The seam at the shoulder ripped. "Rag doll," he shouted. I could read his lips. "Look at the rag doll." They laughed again and walked away high-fiving each other. Sophie sat there. She picked up the wet bread. She wiped it on her jeans. And then she took a bite. I dropped the binoculars. I had my hand on the door handle. I was ready to bolt. I was ready to run across that street, jump that fence, and tear those boys apart. I was ready to grab Sophie and take her away from this hell. I wanted to take her to a diner and buy her a burger and a milkshake and a coat that actually fit. I wanted to take her home and lock the door and never let anyone hurt her again. My muscles were coiled. My breath was coming in short, angry gasps, but I stopped. I froze. The railroad man in me took over. The part of me that knows you do not pull the emergency brake unless you want to derail the whole train. If I took her now, what would happen? Blake was her father. He had legal custody. He had the law on his side. If I took her, he would call the police. He would say I kidnapped her. He would say I was a crazy old man, and he would be right in the eyes of the law. The police would bring her back to him, and then he would punish her. He would take it out on her when no one was watching. He would send her to that camp I found the brochure for, or worse, he would disappear with her and I would never see her again. I could not save her with my fists. Not today. I needed to destroy him completely. I needed to take away his power, his money, his freedom. I needed to put him in a cage where he could never touch her again. I needed evidence. I needed a case so airtight that even his high-priced lawyers could not save him. I slowly released the door handle. I sat back in the seat. I watched Sophie finish her wet bread. I watched her shiver. "I am sorry, baby girl," I whispered, tears streaming down my rough cheeks. "I am so sorry. Just hold on a little longer. Grandpa is building a trap." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking, but I dialed the number I knew by heart. Isaac Rosen, my oldest friend. We grew up on the same block. He went to law school while I went to the rails. He was retired now, but he was still the sharpest legal mind in Chicago. "Hello, Alvin." Isaac answered, his voice raspy. "Isaac," I said, "I need you. I need you to wake up your contacts. I need you to pull every favor you have ever been owed." "What is wrong, Alvin? You sound like you want to kill someone." "I do, Isaac. I really do. But I need to do it legally. I need you to investigate Blake Anderson." My son-in-law, Isaac asked, surprised. "He is not my son-in-law anymore," I growled. "He is a target. I want his bank accounts. I want his credit history. I want to know every dime he has spent in the last 5 years. I want to know who he is sleeping with. I want to know what he eats for breakfast." "Alvin, what did he do?" "He stole everything, Isaac. He stole Tiana's money. He stole my money, and he is starving my granddaughter." There was a silence on the line. Then Isaac spoke, his voice cold and professional. "Come to my office, Alvin. Bring everything you have. We will bury him." I hung up the phone. I looked at Sophie one last time. The bell rang. She stood up and walked toward the gray building, her head down, her broken shoes dragging on the pavement. I started the truck. I turned away from the school. I was not going to cry anymore. I had work to do. I drove toward Isaac's office, but my mind was already working on the next step. I needed to get inside Blake's head. I needed to see the inside of his life. I needed to know exactly how the money was flowing. And to do that, I needed to become someone else. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Gray hair, tired eyes, wrinkles carved by wind and sun. Blake Anderson saw me as a senile old fool, a mark, a cash cow. Fine. I would be exactly what he wanted to see. I would be the old man losing his mind. I would be the burden he wanted to discard. I would walk right into his house, and I would rot there in the middle of his living room until I found the smoking gun. I turned the truck toward the thrift store on 47th Street. I needed a costume. I needed clothes that smelled like mothballs and failure. The game was on Blake, and you did not even know you were playing. I spent an hour in a Goodwill store on 47th Street picking out the uniform of a man who had given up. I found a pair of gray slacks that were 2 sizes too big so they would bunch up around my waist and drag at the heels. I found a flannel shirt with a stain on the collar that looked like old coffee or maybe dried blood. I bought a cardigan that smelled of mothballs and dust. I did not wash them. I wanted the smell. I wanted the stink of failure to cling to me. I drove my truck to a gas station bathroom and changed. I looked in the cracked mirror. I let my shoulders slump forward. I relaxed the muscles in my face until my jowls hung loose. I practiced the tremor in my right hand. It is harder than it looks to fake a shake. You have to tense the forearm but let the fingers go loose. I did it until my hand cramped. I practiced the walk too, the shuffle of a man whose knees have turned to dust, a man who is afraid of the floor. When I walked out of that bathroom, Alvin Mercer, the strong railroad engineer, was gone. In his place was Al the burden, Al the nuisance, Al the senile old fool who was about to become Blake Anderson's worst nightmare. I drove to the suburbs. It was dark by the time I pulled up to the house. This was the house Tiana and Blake had bought when they got married. I had given them the down payment. It used to be a jewel. Tiana had planted hydrangeas along the walkway and kept the shutters painted a crisp white. Now it looked like a rot had set in from the inside out. The grass was dead and matted, a brown tangle of neglect. The shutters were peeling, revealing gray wood underneath. There was a gutter hanging loose on the left side, dripping water onto the porch steps. It looked like a house where hope had packed its bags and left years ago. I parked the truck crookedly in the driveway, blocking Blake's path. I wanted to annoy him right from the start. I shuffled up the walk, leaning heavily on a cane I had bought for $5. I took a deep breath, letting the cold air fill my lungs one last time before I started the performance of my life. I rang the doorbell. I kept my finger on the button a little too long. The door jerked open. Blake stood there. He was not wearing his cashmere coat now. He was in sweatpants and a stained t-shirt holding a beer bottle. His eyes widened when he saw me. For a second, I saw panic. He looked past me, scanning the street, probably checking to see if I had brought the police. "Alvin," he said, his voice tight. "What are you doing here?" "It is Tuesday. You never come on Tuesdays." I let my jaw hang open a little. I let my hand shake so the cane tapped against the porch floor. Tap, tap, tap. "I was lonely, Blake," I said, my voice raspy and weak. The house was so quiet. I just wanted to see family. Blake blocked the doorway. He did not invite me in. "It is not a good time, Alvin," he said. "We are busy. Sophie is doing homework." "Who is it, honey?" a woman's voice called from inside. It was her, the blonde woman from the penthouse. Blake winced. He looked at me, then back into the house. He was trapped. He could not slam the door in my face without looking suspicious. "It is Grandpa. Come in, the woman said, appearing behind Blake. She was wearing tight jeans and a sweater that looked expensive, but she had put on a pair of fake reading glasses. Blake stepped aside reluctantly. I shuffled inside. The smell hit me first. Stale pizza, dog hair, and underneath it all, that expensive perfume the woman wore. It was a sickening mix. "This is Courtney," Blake said quickly. "She is Sophie's tutor. She comes over to help with math." Tutor. Right. I looked at Courtney. She did not look like any tutor I had ever seen. Her nails were 3 inches long and painted blood red. "Hello, Mr. Mercer," she said, flashing a bright predatory smile. "Blake has told me so much about you." "I bet he has," I mumbled, playing the confused old man. "Nice to meet you, Ma. Are you the cleaning lady?" Courtney's smile stiffened. "No, sweetie, I am the tutor." I shuffled into the dining room. Sophie was sitting at the table. The table was covered in papers, but they were not homework. They were racing forms, gambling sheets. Blake swept them off the table as I entered, stuffing them into a drawer. Sophie looked up. Her eyes were wide with fear. She saw my clothes. She saw the shake in my hand. She opened her mouth to say something, but I caught her eye and gave a nearly imperceptible wink. She closed her mouth. She understood. She was smart like her mother. "Grandpa," she whispered. "Hey, baby girl," I said. I shuffled over and patted her head. My hand was shaking, but when I touched her hair, I let it rest steady for a second just to let her know I was there. "Have you eaten?" Blake asked. He sounded impatient. He wanted me gone. "No," I said. "I forgot to go to the store." Blake sighed loudly. "Well, we were just ordering pizza. I guess we can get an extra one." We sat around the table in an awkward silence while we waited for the food. The house was a mess. There were boxes everywhere, like someone was half packed or half unpacked. The big flat-screen TV on the wall was new, though, top of the line. When the pizza arrived, Blake threw the cardboard boxes onto the table. No plates, no napkins. I took a slice, my hand trembling so much the pepperoni fell off. I watched them. Blake ate fast like a wolf. Courtney picked at hers, looking at her phone every 30 seconds. Sophie ate hungrily, keeping her head down. I cleared my throat. I let a little bit of water dribble down my chin from the glass and wiped it with my sleeve. Blake looked at me with open disgust. "I have bad news, Blake," I said. He stopped chewing. "What is it?" "The railroad," I said. "They sent me a letter, the pension fund. It is gone. Mismanagement, they said. They cut my check. I got nothing coming in next month." Nothing at all. The room went dead silent. The only sound was the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Blake put his pizza down. His face went pale. "What do you mean gone?" he asked, his voice rising. "That is guaranteed money, Alvin." "That is what I thought I said, making my voice crack. But it is gone. And the bank took my house. Foreclosure. I did not understand the letters they sent. I thought they were junk mail. This was the hook. I watched him swallow it. So I packed a bag. I continued gesturing to the small suitcase by the door. "I have nowhere to go, Blake. I need to move in here. Just for a while. Until I die, I guess. I can sleep on the sofa. I won't be a bother." Panic exploded in Blake's eyes. It was raw and ugly. He looked at Courtney. She looked furious. This was not part of their plan. They wanted my money, not my carcass stinking up their living room. You cannot live here, Blake said quickly. It is impossible, Alvin. Look at this place. It is a mess. We do not have room. I can sleep in Sophie's room, I said. She can sleep with you. No, Blake shouted, slamming his hand on the table. Absolutely not. You need professional care, Alvin. If you lost your house and your money, you are obviously not capable of taking care of yourself. But I am family, I whined, leaning into the role. I took care of Tiana. I gave you money every year. That money is gone, Blake snapped, spent on bills. We are broke, Alvin. We cannot afford to feed another mouth, especially not one that needs special attention. He looked at me like I was a sick dog that needed to be put down. There are places for people like you, he said, his voice dropping to a cold whisper. State facilities, government homes. They will take you in. They have beds. They have nurses. It is better for everyone. You would put me in a state home, I asked, letting a tear roll down my cheek. Those places are awful, Blake. They smell like urine and death. It is not up to me, he said, leaning back, crossing his arms. It is the only option. I will call a social worker tomorrow. We will get you processed. You can stay tonight on the couch, but tomorrow, you go. I looked at Sophie. She was trembling. She started to reach for my hand under the table. She opened her mouth to defend me, to scream at her father that he was lying, that he had money. Stop it, Sophie, she began. Suddenly, Courtney's hand shot out under the table. It was fast, like a snake strike. I saw her shoulder dip. I saw her arm tense. Sophie gasped. Her eyes filled with tears. She yanked her hand back and clutched it to her chest. She bit her lips so hard it turned white. Courtney had pinched her. Hard. Viciously. Courtney smiled at me, a sweet, poisonous smile. Eat your pizza. Sophie, she said, her voice sugary, let the adults talk. Your grandfather is tired. He does not know what he is saying. I saw the red mark forming on Sophie's arm. My blood ran cold. Then it boiled. It took every ounce of discipline I had learned in 68 years not to reach across that table and break Courtney's fingers one by one. I wanted to flip the table. I wanted to smash their faces into the pepperoni and cheese, but I did not. I let my hands shake. I let my head drop. Okay, I whispered. Okay, you are right. I am just a burden. I will go to the home tomorrow. Blake let out a breath he had been holding. He exchanged a look with Courtney, a look of victory. They thought they had won. They thought the problem was solved. They thought the old man was broken and the girl was silenced. They were wrong. I stood up shakily, leaning on my cane. I need to use the bathroom, I mumbled. My stomach. The stress. Just go. Blake waved a hand dismissively. Down the hall. Do not make a mess. I shuffled down the hallway. I went into the bathroom and locked the door. I turned on the faucet so the water ran loud. I looked in the mirror. The defeated old man looked back at me. But behind the drooping eyes, the fire was burning. They hurt her. They hurt my Sophie right in front of me. I turned off the water. I did not use the toilet. I opened the door quietly. They were in the kitchen now, arguing in hushed whispers. We have to find his bank records, Courtney hissed. If he lost the pension, he might still have savings. We need to know before the state takes him. He is an idiot, Blake whispered back. He probably keeps cash in that truck. Go check his coat while he is in the John. I slipped past the kitchen toward the back of the house, toward the office Blake called his studio. The door was closed. I tried the handle. Locked. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a thin piece of metal I had shaped from a wiper blade. Old railroad trick for opening supply lockers. I slid it into the lock. It clicked. I pushed the door open and slipped inside. The room was dark. I pulled out a small pen light. I was in. Now I had to find the smoking gun. And I had about 3 minutes before they realized the old man had not flushed. I sat on the sagging sofa in the living room listening to the low murmur of Blake and Courtney arguing in the kitchen. They were trying to figure out if I had any hidden assets left to plunder. My chest felt tight, but not from asthma. It was tight from the sheer force of the hatred I was holding back. I needed them out of the house. I needed 20 minutes alone in that office to find the paper trail that would send them to prison. I started to wheeze. It was a sound I learned from an old brakeman named Earl who used to get out of hard labor by faking emphysema. I sucked air through my teeth, making a high-pitched whistling noise. I clutched my chest. I let my body slide sideways on the cushions until I was half lying down. "Blake!" I rasped my voice, thin and panicked. "Blake, I cannot breathe." Blake appeared in the doorway. He looked annoyed, not scared. "What is it now, Alvin?" he asked, holding a glass of wine. "My inhaler," I wheezed. I left it. "At the old house. I need the nebulizer solution. The specific one. Albuterol sulfate. I cannot." I let out a coughing fit that shook my whole frame. I made my face turn red by holding my breath between coughs. Courtney came up behind him. "If he dies here, we have to call the coroner," she hissed. "That brings police. That brings questions we do not want right now." Blake cursed. He looked at his watch. "Fine," he snapped. "Where is the pharmacy?" "The 24-hour one," I gasped. "On State Street. It is the only one that carries the brand I need. Please, Blake. My chest. It hurts." State Street was 20 minutes away round trip if you drove fast. If I was lucky, I would get 30 minutes. "Write it down," Blake ordered. I scribbled the name of a generic medication on a napkin with a shaking hand. "We will be back in 30 minutes, Blake said, grabbing his keys. "Do not die on my couch, Alvin. It would really ruin my night." Courtney grabbed her purse. "I am coming with you. I need cigarettes. And I do not want to be alone with him if he croaks." They left. I heard the heavy front door slam. I heard the Range Rover start up and peel out of the driveway. I waited 10 seconds, then 10 more. I went to the window and watched the taillights disappear around the corner. The moment they were gone, the senile old man vanished. I stood up straight. The wheezing stopped. I moved with the speed of a man who used to jump onto moving freight cars. I went straight to the locked office door. I did not have time to be gentle. I pulled the thin metal shim from my pocket again. I jammed it into the door frame, sliding it down until I felt the latch bolt. I applied pressure to the handle and torqued the shim. The cheap builder-grade lock popped open with a sharp click. I slipped inside and closed the door behind me. I turned on my pen light, keeping the beam low. The room was a disaster. It smelled of stale cigar smoke and sweat. There were no blueprints. There were no architectural drawings. The desk was buried under mountains of paper. I started digging. I did not look for organization because there was none. I looked for logos, banks, Casper's Casino, the State of Illinois Tax Revenue Service. I found them. They were stuffed into unpaid bill envelopes. They were crumbled into balls and thrown in the corner. I smoothed out a letter from the Horseshoe Casino in Hammond, Indiana. Notice of outstanding debt. $42,000. Final warning before collection agency referral. I found another one from a private lender. This one did not have a logo. It just had a phone number and a handwritten note. "You have until Friday, Blake, or we take knees." The amount was $60,000. I opened the bottom drawer of the desk. It was locked, but a swift kick to the wood next to the latch splintered it enough to pry it open. Inside was the house file. I flipped through it. The deed was there, but it was stapled to 3 other documents. Second mortgage, third mortgage, notice of default. He had leveraged the house Tiana bought. He had drained every cent of equity out of it. The bank was starting foreclosure proceedings next month. The house was gone. The equity was gone. My $50,000 a year was gone. But where did it go? You do not lose that much just on clothes and dinners. I kept digging. I found a shoebox under the desk filled with losing lottery tickets. Thousands of them. He was not just a gambler. He was an addict. He was throwing money into a hole that could never be filled. Then I saw the trash can. It was overflowing. I pulled it out and dumped the contents onto the floor. Receipts for liquor. Receipts for a hotel in the city, probably where he met Courtney before tonight. And then at the bottom I saw a glossy brochure that had been torn in half. I pieced it together. The front cover showed a picture of a mountain range with a sun rising over it. It looked peaceful. It looked wholesome. Sunshine Youth Behavioral Camp, the text read. Utah. I knew about these places. I had read the news stories. They call them troubled teen camps. They are prisons. They hire goons to kidnap children in the middle of the night. They take them to the desert. They force them to march until their feet bleed. They scream at them. They break them. They call it therapy. I call it torture. I turned the brochure over. There was a handwritten note on the back in Blake's jagged script. Transport arranged for Wednesday 4 a.m. $5,000 deposit paid. Monthly fee $6,000. Wednesday. That was tomorrow morning. My blood froze in my veins. This was the plan. This was why he needed the money so desperately. This was why he needed me out of the way. He was not just neglecting Sophie. He was selling her. He was going to pay strangers to come into this house while she slept, take her from her bed and drag her to a living hell in the Utah desert. Why? I found the answer stapled to the back of the brochure. It was a printout of an email from a real estate agent. Blake, the email read, "We have a cash buyer for the house. They want a quick close. No inspections. But the property must be vacant. No tenants, no family members. Closing date is Thursday." He was selling the house out from under her. He needed Sophie gone so he could hand over the keys and take the cash to run away with Courtney. He was going to dump his own daughter in a prison camp and disappear with the money. I looked at the time on the invoice. The transport team was scheduled to arrive in 6 hours. I felt a nausea so violent I had to lean against the desk. I looked at the brochure again. The smiling stock photo children mocked me. He was going to throw her away like trash. I took out my phone. I took pictures of everything. The casino debts, the foreclosure notice, the threatening note from the loan shark, the brochure for the camp, the email about the house sale. My hands were steady now. The rage had burned past the point of shaking. It was a cold, solid thing in my chest. I folded the brochure and put it in my inside pocket. This was it. This was the nail in the coffin. I heard a sound outside, tires crunching on gravel. They were back. They were early. I looked at my watch. Only 15 minutes had passed. They must have driven like maniacs. I scrambled to put the papers back. I shoved the trash back into the bin. I threw the folders into the drawer and kicked it shut. It did not close all the way because of the splintered wood. I grabbed a stack of magazines and piled them in front of the drawer to hide the damage. I turned off the pen light. I stepped out of the office and pulled the door shut. I used the shim to re-engage the lock. It clicked just as the front door handle turned. I ran. I did not shuffle. I ran on the balls of my feet to the living room. I threw myself onto the sofa. I grabbed a throw blanket and pulled it up to my chin. I let my mouth fall open. I started to make a soft snoring sound. The front door opened. A gust of cold wind blew in. "He is asleep," Courtney said, her voice disgusted. "Look at him, drooling on the cushion." "Did you get the medicine?" Blake asked. "Yeah, but I doubt he needs it," Courtney replied. "He is just old and dying. Let him sleep. We have to pack. The transport crew will be here in a few hours, and I do not want to be awake when they drag the brat out." I kept my eyes closed. I kept my breathing rhythmic, but under the blanket my hand was clutching the brochure so hard the paper was cutting into my skin. They thought I was asleep. They thought I was helpless, but I was wide awake. And I knew exactly what I had to do. I had 6 hours to save my granddaughter. I had 6 hours to destroy Blake Anderson. The train was coming down the mountain, and it had no brakes. I sat up on the sofa, groaning loudly as I shifted my weight. The blanket slipped to the floor. I rubbed my eyes, acting like a man waking up from a deep, confused sleep. The house was quiet now. Courtney had gone to the guest room to pack or sleep, I did not know which. Blake was in the kitchen, sitting at the island with a bottle of scotch and a stack of unpaid bills. He looked like a man on death row waiting for the executioner. I stood up and shuffled toward the kitchen. I let my feet drag. I let my shoulders hunch. I needed him to see the old man one last time before I showed him the winning lottery ticket. Blake looked up as I entered. His eyes were red and glassy. He looked at me with a mixture of hatred and exhaustion. "What do you want, Alvin?" he snapped. "Go back to sleep. We have a big day tomorrow." I knew what the big day was. It was the day he planned to ship my granddaughter to a prison camp and throw me into the street. But I did not say that. I pulled out a chair and sat down opposite him. I placed my hands on the table. They were not shaking anymore. "I need to talk to you, son," I said, my voice low and serious. Blake scoffed. He took a swig of scotch straight from the bottle. "There is nothing to talk about, Alvin. You are broke. We are broke. Go to bed." "I am not broke, Blake." The words hung in the air between us. Blake froze the bottle halfway to his mouth. He lowered it slowly. He looked at me. Really looked at me for the first time in hours. "What did you say?" he asked. I said, "I am not broke. I lied to you earlier. I lied about the pension. I lied about the foreclosure." Blake slammed the bottle down. Whiskey sloshed onto the granite counter. "Is this some kind of sick joke, old man? Because if it is, I swear to God I will throw you out right now." "It is not a joke," I said calmly. I reached into the inside pocket of my cardigan. I did not pull out the brochure for the youth camp. I pulled out an old leather-bound passbook. It was a prop I had kept in my truck for years, a relic from my grandfather that I used to track my own savings before everything went digital. It looked ancient. It looked valuable. My grandfather worked the rails before me, I said, smoothing the leather cover with my calloused thumb. He did not trust banks, not after the Depression. He bought land, Blake, scrub land in Georgia, worthless dirt, everyone said. But he held on to it. When he died, he left it to me in a trust. Blake was leaning forward now. The hatred in his eyes was replaced by a flicker of interest, a hungry shark sensing a drop of blood in the water. So what, he asked? You have some dirt in Georgia? Who cares? The state of Georgia cared, I said, lying as easily as I breathed. They needed it for a new highway interchange. Eminent domain. They paid top dollar, Blake. The money has been sitting in a trust account for 30 years, accruing interest. I never touched it. I never needed it. I lived on my railroad pay. How much, Blake whispered. The scotch was forgotten. The bills were forgotten. The only thing that existed for him was the number I was about to say. I opened the passbook. I pointed to a handwritten figure on the last page. It was a fake entry I had scribbled in the bathroom at the gas station, but in the dim light of the kitchen it looked real enough. $500,000, I said. $500,000. Cash. Blake made a sound in his throat like a dying animal. He stared at the book. He reached out a trembling hand to touch it. 500,000, he repeated. His voice cracked. It is all there, I said, closing the book and pulling it back out of his reach. I was saving it for a rainy day, or for Sophie's college. But tonight, when I saw you stressing over these bills, when I saw how hard you are working to keep this family afloat, I realized something. I looked him dead in the eye, channeling every ounce of sincerity I could muster. I realized, I have been selfish, Blake. I have been hoarding this money while you suffer. You are my son-in-law. You are the father of my grandchild. You took me in tonight when I told you I was destitute. You fed me. You gave me a place to sleep. That showed me your character. It showed me his character, all right. It showed me he was a snake. But snakes are greedy and greed makes them stupid. Blake blinked. Tears actually welled up in his eyes. Real tears. Not tears of sorrow, but tears of relief. Tears of a man who just watched the guillotine blade stop an inch from his neck. Oh my God, Alvin, he choked out. You have no idea how hard it has been. He stood up and came around the island. He fell to his knees beside my chair. He grabbed my hand, the same hand he had planned to force into signing away my rights, and he kissed it. I am so sorry, Dad, he sobbed, using the word he knew I wanted to hear. I have been so stressed. The business, the market, it has been brutal. I did not want to worry you. I wanted to be strong for you and Sophie. But I am drowning. I am drowning, Dad. He buried his face in my lap, weeping. It was a disgusting display. A grown man crying over money he had done nothing to earn. I patted his head, forcing myself not to recoil. I stroked his hair like he was a child. It is okay, son, I said softly. It is okay. I am here now. I can fix it. You will help us, he asked, looking up, his face wet and red. You will give us the money. I will, I said. I will give you everything. The full 500,000. It is yours, Blake. You can pay off the house. You can pay your debts. You can invest in your firm. You can give Sophie the life she deserves. Thank you, he babbled, clutching my leg. I swear, Alvin, I will take care of you. You will never have to worry about anything again. We will build you a suite right here in the house. We will get the best doctors. You will live like a king, Dad. Like a king. I listened to his lies. I knew that 5 minutes ago he was planning to dump me in a state facility. I knew that tomorrow he was going to sell this house. But money changes everything. $500,000 was enough to buy a new script. There is just one thing, I said, gently pulling away from his grasp. Anything, he said, scrambling back to his seat. Anything you want, Alvin. I want to do this right, I said. I want to honor Tiana. And I want to honor my wife, God rest her soul. Our wedding anniversary would have been this Saturday. 45 years. Blake nodded eagerly, wiping his face with his sleeve. Yes, of course. Saturday. I want to sign the check over to you on Saturday, I said. But not here. Not in this kitchen. I want a party, Blake. A party, he asked, confused. Yes, I said firmly. A celebration. I want you to invite everyone. Your business partners, your friends, the neighbors, anyone who matters. I want to stand up in front of everyone and hand you that check. I want to make a speech. I want to tell the world that you are the head of this family now. I want to publicly transfer the legacy to you. I saw the wheels turning in his head. A party, a public display of wealth. It fed his ego. It fed his narcissism. He could show off to his friends. He could prove to his creditors that he was solvent. He could parade his rich father-in-law around like a trophy. "It sounds amazing, Alvin," he said, a smile spreading across his face. "A real celebration. We can do it at the Drake. Or maybe that new steakhouse downtown. I know the owner." "The steakhouse," I said. "Make it grand, Blake. Spend whatever you need. You will have the money on Saturday night." "Done," he said. "Consider it done." "Bitter." "And one more thing," I added, my voice hardening just a fraction. "What is it?" he asked. "Sophie," I said. "I want her there. Standing right next to me when I sign the papers. She is the future Blake. This money is for her, too." Blake's face faltered for a second. He remembered the transport crew coming at 4 a.m. He remembered the camp in Utah. "Of course," he said slowly. "Sophie will be there." "Good," I said. "Because if she is not there, Blake, if she is away at camp or school or anywhere else, I cannot sign the papers. It has to be the whole family, united." I watched him do the math. If he sent Sophie away, he lost $500,000. If he kept her, he got the money and he could always send her away next week. It was a simple calculation for a man without a soul. "She will be there," he promised. "I will cancel. I will clear her schedule. She will be the princess of the ball." I smiled. A tired, relieved old man smile. "Thank you, son," I said. "That makes me very happy. Now, if you do not mind, I am exhausted. All this excitement." I stood up. Blake jumped up to help me. He offered me his arm. He walked me to the sofa. He fluffed the pillow. He pulled the blanket up over my shoulders. "Sleep well, Dad," he whispered. "Everything is going to be perfect." I closed my eyes. I listened to him walk back to the kitchen. I heard him pour another drink, but this time it was a celebratory pour. I heard him dial a number. "Hey, it is Blake," he said into the phone, his voice hushed but jubilant. "Cancel the transport for tomorrow." "Yeah, the kid stays." Something came up, something big. "I will pay the cancellation fee. Just do it." I let out a long, slow breath in the darkness. The bait was taken. The hook was set. He thought he was getting a fortune. He thought he was getting a coronation. He did not know he was planning his own funeral. Saturday night was going to be spectacular. I would make sure of it. But first, I had work to do. I had saved Sophie from the immediate threat, but she was still in the house with the wolf. And I still needed to ensure that when the trap snapped shut, it caught everyone. Courtney, the loan sharks, the whole rotten system he had built. I lay there in the dark listening to the wind howl outside. My hand rested on the pocket where the brochure for the youth camp still sat burning against my chest. You bought yourself 3 days, Blake, I thought. 3 days to strut. 3 days to dream. Enjoy them. Because when Saturday comes, the check I sign is going to bounce so hard it will knock you straight into a jail cell. I checked into the Bluebird Motel on the outskirts of the city on Wednesday afternoon. It was the kind of place where the neon sign flickered and the carpet smelled of 40 years of cheap cigarettes and bad decisions. It was perfect. It was exactly where a destitute old man who had lost his pension would end up. I paid for a week in cash. I told the clerk I needed a ground floor room because of my knees. I laid low. I waited. On Thursday morning around 11 o'clock, there was a knock on the door. It was a tentative knock, not the heavy fist of a landlord or the sharp rap of the police. It was a polite knock, a knock that wanted something. I shuffled to the door, leaning heavily on my cane. I opened it a crack, leaving the security chain on. Courtney was standing there. She looked completely out of place in the grimy parking lot of the Bluebird. She was wearing a pastel pink cashmere sweater and white jeans that cost more than the truck parked behind her. She held a large plastic container in her hands wrapped in a tea towel. "Alvin," she said, her face twisting into a mask of concern. "Oh, thank God. Blake told me you were staying here. We were so worried." I undid the chain and opened the door. I let my shoulders slump. I looked at her with wide, watery eyes. "Hello, Courtney," I rasped. "It is not much, but it is a roof." She stepped inside, wrinkling her nose as the smell of the room hit her. She tried to hide it, but I saw the disgust flicker across her face like a shadow. She looked around at the peeling wallpaper and the stained bedspread. "It is cozy," she lied. "Really, Alvin, you do not have to stay here. The offer for the state facility is still open. Blake just wants you safe." I know. I mumbled, shuffling toward the single chair in the corner. I just need a few days, before the big party. I want to clear my head. Courtney nodded. She set the container down on the scratched laminate table. I brought you something, she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. I know you do not have a kitchen here, and Blake said you looked so thin the other night. I made you my special mushroom soup. It is a family recipe, very rich, very filling. I looked at the container. It was still warm. Condensation clung to the lid. That is very kind of you, Ma'am, I said. You did not have to do that. Oh, I wanted to, she said, walking over and placing a hand on my shoulder. Her touch made my skin crawl. We are going to be family, Alvin. With the money you are giving us, we are going to build a whole new life. I want to start off on the right foot. I want to take care of you. She squeezed my shoulder. It was meant to be reassuring, but it felt like a test. She was checking to see how frail I really was. You are a good woman, Courtney. I lied. Blake is lucky. She smiled. It was a sharp smile. A smile that showed too many teeth. Eat it while it is hot, she urged. It will help you sleep. You look like you need rest. Big day Saturday. We need you strong enough to sign those papers. She checked her watch. A gold Rolex. Probably bought with the money meant for Sophie's dental work. I have to run, she said. I have a nail appointment, but promise me you will eat every drop. I promise, I said. She blew me a kiss and walked out the door. I watched her get into her white convertible and drive away. She did not look back. She did not care about the old man in the motel room. She only cared about the signature he could provide. I locked the door. I slid the chain back into place. I walked over to the table. I stared at the soup. It looked innocent enough. Creamy, thick, chunks of mushroom floating in a gray-beige sauce. But I spent 40 years on the railroad. You develop instincts. You learn to smell trouble before you see it. You learn that when a bearing overheats, it gives off a specific scent. You learn that when a storm is coming, the air pressure changes. And you learn that people do not change their nature overnight. Courtney despised me. She had pinched my granddaughter until she bruised. She had laughed about throwing me into a state home. Why would she suddenly drive across town to bring me soup? Because she was impatient. Because Saturday was 2 days away. And maybe she was worried I would change my mind. Maybe she was worried I would spend the money. Or maybe she just wanted to make sure I was pliable. Confused. Weak. I unscrewed the lid. Steam rose up. It smelled of cream and garlic and thyme. Heavy on the garlic. Too heavy. I leaned closer. Underneath the garlic, underneath the earthiness of the mushrooms, there was something else. A faint metallic tang. A sharpness that caught in the back of my throat. It reminded me of the solvent we used to use to strip rust off the tracks, or the bitter smell of almonds that have gone bad. I stirred it with a plastic spoon. The texture was gritty. Not like flour that had not been mixed properly, like something had been ground up and added. I could not eat this, but I could not just throw it away. I needed to know. I looked around the room. In the corner by the window there was a potted plant, a philodendron. It was a tough plant. The kind that survives in motels because it can go weeks without water. It was green and healthy, its vines trailing down the side of the pot. I am sorry, little guy, I whispered. I took the soup container over to the plant. I poured a generous amount into the soil. The thick liquid pooled on the dirt, then slowly seeped down to the roots. I put the lid back on the container. I poured the rest of the soup down the toilet and flushed it twice to make sure no residue remained. I washed the container out in the sink, scrubbing it with the cheap bar soap until it smelled like nothing. I sat in the chair and waited. I watched the plant. For the first few hours, nothing happened. The sun went down. The neon sign outside started to buzz and flicker, casting red shadows across the room. I dozed off in the chair, my hand resting on my cane. I woke up when the sun hit my face. It was Friday morning. I looked at the plant. It was dead, not just wilting. It was decimated. The leaves had turned a sickly yellow-brown overnight. They were shriveled and dry like they had been burned from the inside out. The stems had collapsed. The plant looked like it had been dead for weeks. My blood ran cold. That was not food poisoning. That was not a mistake. That was poison. Chemical. Potent. If I had eaten that soup, I would not be waking up this morning. Or if I did, I would be in a hospital bed, my mind gone, my organs failing, unable to speak, unable to stop them. They were not waiting for Saturday. Or maybe they were, but they wanted to make sure I was incompetent by then. If I was sick, if I was delirious, Blake could claim power of attorney. He could say I was too ill to manage the funds myself. He could guide my hand on the check. Or maybe they just wanted me dead. Dead men do not change their wills. Dead men do not ask questions. Rage, unlike anything I had felt before, surged through me. It was not the cold anger of the cemetery. This was hot. This was violent. They tried to kill me. I stood up. I walked to the plant and touched a leaf. It crumbled to dust in my fingers. I took a picture of the plant. I took a picture of the empty soup container. Then I reached for my phone. I needed to make a call. I needed to play the next scene in this twisted play. I dialed Courtney's number. I had saved it from Blake's phone when I was in his office. She answered on the second ring. "Hello, Courtney?" I wheezed, my voice sounding weak and trembling. "It is Alvin." "Alvin," she said. Her voice perked up. "How are you feeling?" "Not good," I groaned. "I feel terrible, Courtney. My stomach. It is in knots. I have been dizzy all morning. I can barely stand up." I heard the smile in her voice. I could practically see it. "Oh no," she said, sounding anything but sorry. "That sounds awful. Maybe it was the excitement. Did you eat the soup?" "I ate it all," I lied. "It was delicious. But about an hour later, I started feeling so weak. My head is spinning. I think I need to lay down." "You should rest, Alvin," she said soothingly. "Just stay in bed. Do not try to go anywhere. You need to save your strength for tomorrow." "I do not know if I can make it to the party," I whispered. "I feel like I am fading, Courtney." "You have to make it," she said, her voice sharpening. "You promised Blake. Just sleep today. Do not call a doctor. Doctors just complicate things. Just sleep it off. We will come pick you up tomorrow afternoon. We will help you." "You are so good to me," I rasped. "Thank you, Courtney. You are an angel." "Get some rest, Alvin," she said. "Goodbye." She hung up. I stared at the phone. An angel of death. She thought it was working. She thought the poison was coursing through my veins, shutting down my kidneys, scrambling my brain. She thought she had won. She had no idea that she had just handed me the weapon I needed to destroy her. I was not just fighting a thief anymore. I was fighting a murderer. And the rules of engagement had just changed. I looked at the dead plant one last time. "Rest in peace," I whispered. "You took a bullet for me." I grabbed my bag. I could not stay here. If she decided to come check on her handiwork, she would see a healthy man and a dead plant. I needed to move. But first, I had one more stop to make. I had saved Sophie from the camp. Now I had to save her from the house. Because if these people were willing to poison an old man, I did not want to think about what they would do to a little girl if things went wrong tomorrow. I called Isaac Rosen. "Isaac," I said when he answered, "is the safe house ready?" "It is ready, Alvin. The papers are drawn up. The private security is on standby." "Good," I said, "because I am going to get Sophie. Today." "But the party is tomorrow," Isaac said. "If you take her now, Blake will know." "Let him know," I growled. "Let him think I am taking her for ice cream. Let him think whatever he wants. But that little girl is not spending another night under the same roof as that woman. She tried to poison me, Isaac." There was a silence on the line. Then Isaac's voice came back hard as steel. "Get the girl, Alvin. Bring her here. We will handle the rest." I hung up. I walked out of the motel room into the bright, cold sunlight. I felt stronger than I had in years. The adrenaline was pumping through my veins like diesel fuel. I got into my truck. I revved the engine. "I was coming for you, Sophie, and this time I was not asking for permission." I drove my truck straight up to the curb of Lincoln Elementary School at 2 in the afternoon on Friday. The dismissal bell had not rung yet. The playground was empty. The gray concrete building looked like a fortress holding my granddaughter prisoner. But I had the key in my pocket. It was a single piece of paper, creased and worn at the edges, but legally bulletproof. I walked into the main office. The air smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. The secretary, a tired woman with glasses on a chain, looked up from her computer. "Can I help you, sir?" "I am here to pick up my granddaughter, Sophie Anderson," I said. My voice was calm, but it had the weight of a freight train behind it. "I need to take her out of school early." The secretary frowned. "Is her father here?" "Mr. Anderson is listed as the primary guardian. We cannot release a student to anyone else without prior authorization." I reached into my jacket pocket. I pulled out the document. It was a durable power of attorney for child care. Tiana had signed it 6 years ago, right after Sophie was born. She had been worried about Blake even then. She wanted to make sure that if anything happened to her or if she was incapacitated, I would have full legal authority to make decisions for Sophie. It did not expire upon her death. It was valid until revoked, and Blake in his arrogance had never bothered to revoke it because he probably did not know it existed. I slid the paper across the counter. "This is a legal document signed by her mother granting me full guardianship rights," I stated. "You can call your legal department if you want, but I am taking my granddaughter, now." The secretary read it. Her eyes widened. She picked up the phone and dialed a number. She spoke in hushed tones for a minute, then hung up. She looked at me with a new respect. "I will call her down, Mr. Mercer. Please sign here." 5 minutes later, the door to the inner office opened. Sophie walked out. She was wearing that same thin denim jacket. Her head was down. She looked terrified, like she was being called to the principal office for punishment. When she looked up and saw me, her face crumbled. "Grandpa," she whispered. "Come on, baby girl," I said, holding out my hand. "We are going for a ride." She ran to me. She buried her face in my coat. I could feel her shaking. I led her out of the office past the curious eyes of the staff. I did not look back. I marched her straight to my truck and lifted her into the passenger seat. I buckled her in. I got in the driver's side and locked the doors. I started the engine. As we pulled away from the curb, I saw a black car turn the corner. It looked like the kind of car a loan shark might drive. I did not wait to find out. I hit the gas and merged into traffic, leaving the school and the danger behind us. We drove in silence for a few miles. I kept checking the rearview mirror, making sure we were not being followed. Sophie was curled up in the seat, hugging her knees to her chest. She was staring out the window, but I do not think she was seeing the city. She was seeing ghosts. I reached into the bag on the seat between us. I pulled out a warm cheeseburger and a chocolate milkshake I had bought on the way. "Here," I said softly. "You must be hungry." Sophie looked at the food. Her eyes got wide. She grabbed the burger with both hands and took a huge bite. She ate like a starving animal. She did not chew enough. She just swallowed. It broke my heart to watch. "Slow down, baby," I said gently. "No one is going to take it away. There is plenty more." She nodded, but she did not slow down. She finished the burger in 2 minutes. She drank the milkshake until the straw made that sucking sound at the bottom of the cup. Then she started to cry. It started as a small whimper, but it grew into a wail that filled the cab of the truck. It was the sound of a dam breaking. All the fear, all the pain, all the silence she had held inside came pouring out. I pulled the truck over into a parking lot of an old church. I put it in park and turned to her. "I am sorry, Grandpa," she sobbed. "I am so sorry. I tried to be good. I tried to be quiet." "You have nothing to be sorry for, Sophie," I said, stroking her hair. "You are safe now." She looked at me, her face streaked with tears and ketchup. "He said he was going to kill Mr. Whiskers," she choked out. "Who is Mr. Whiskers?" I asked. "My cat. The stray I found. Daddy said if I told anyone about the money or the school, he would put Mr. Whiskers in a bag and throw him in the river. He said he would make me watch." Rage, hot and blinding, flared in my chest. To threaten a child is one thing. To threaten to kill something she loves to force her into silence is pure evil. "He is not going to hurt anyone, Sophie, I promised." He locked me in the basement. She continued, the words tumbling out faster now. "When Courtney comes over, he puts me in the basement. It is cold down there, Grandpa. There are spiders. He turns off the light. He says I am a distraction. He says I ruin the mood. Sometimes he leaves me down there all night. I have to sleep on the concrete." My hands gripped the steering wheel until the leather creaked. "Does he feed you?" I asked, my voice tight. "Sometimes," she said, "if I am quiet. But if I cry or if I ask for something, he says I am being ungrateful. He says food costs money and I am costing him too much. He says I am a leech. A leech. My 10-year-old granddaughter, the daughter of the woman who worked herself to death for him. He took my new coat," she whispered, "the one you bought me last Christmas. He returned it to the store. He said he needed the cash for gas, but then he came home with a new watch. He wears it all the time. He says time is money." She showed me her arm. She pushed up the sleeve of the denim jacket. There were bruises, old ones yellow and green and new ones purple and angry. He grabs me hard when he is mad, she said. He shakes me. He says I look too much like Mom. He says looking at me makes him sick. I closed my eyes. I could see Tiana's face. I could see her smile. I could see the love she had for Blake, the trust she placed in him. He killed her spirit, I thought. And now he is trying to kill her daughter. Sophie, I said, opening my eyes and looking her dead in the face. Listen to me. You are never going back to that house. You are never going back to that basement. Do you understand me? She nodded, sniffing. But what about the party? He said I have to go to the party tomorrow. He said if I mess it up, he will send me to the bad place in Utah. You are not going to Utah, I said, and you are not going to the party. Well, not the way he thinks. I started the truck again. We are going to see a friend, I said. A very nice man named Mr. Rosen. He has a big house with a fireplace and a wife who bakes cookies. You are going to stay there for a few days. You will have your own room, a warm bed, all the food you can eat, and security guards outside the door. Will you be there? She asked. I will be there soon, I promised. But first I have to go back. I have to finish this. I have to make sure he can never hurt you again. Sophie looked scared, but she nodded. She trusted me. That was the most precious thing in the world. And I was going to earn that trust with fire and blood if I had to. We drove to Isaac Rosen's house in the north suburbs. It was a fortress of stone and security cameras. Isaac met us at the door. He looked at Sophie's thin face and her bruised arm, and his jaw set hard. His wife Sarah took Sophie inside, immediately wrapping her in a warm blanket. Is she okay? Isaac asked me on the porch. She is alive, I said, my voice raspy. But he broke her, Isaac. He starved her and locked her in a basement. Isaac's eyes went cold. We have the documentation ready, he said. The emergency custody order is being filed as we speak. But we need you to go back. We need him to sign the permission slip. It will seal the fraud case. It will prove he abandoned her voluntarily. I know, I said. I am going. I watched Sarah give Sophie a plate of cookies through the window. Sophie smiled a small, tentative smile. I got back in my truck. The sun was setting. The sky was bleeding red. I drove back to the house of horrors. I pulled into the driveway. The lights were on. I could see Blake and Courtney moving around inside, probably getting ready for their big payday. I shuffled up the walk. I put on my mask. The confused old man. The easy mark. I opened the front door. Blake was in the living room holding a suit bag. Where have you been? He snapped. And where is Sophie? I went to pick her up at school and they said you took her. What the hell, Alvin? I leaned on my cane, acting out of breath. I am sorry, son, I wheezed. I got confused. I went to get her because she called me. She said she forgot to tell you about the field trip. Field trip? Blake asked, narrowing his eyes. What field trip? The school camping trip, I lied smoothly. For the honors students. They are going to the nature preserve for 3 days. They left this afternoon. She was crying because she did not have her permission slip signed. She wanted to go so bad, Blake. She said it was extra credit. Blake stared at me. He was processing this. Sophie was gone for 3 days. That meant she would miss the party tomorrow. But I told you she had to be at the party, he said, his voice rising. I told you I needed her there to sign the papers. I know, I said, looking distressed. I told her that. But she said the bus was leaving. I did not want her to miss out. She is a smart girl, Blake. She wants to do well in school. I paused, letting the silence stretch. Then I dropped the bait. Look, Blake, I said. I know you wanted the perfect family photo, but maybe it is better this way. She is just a kid. She gets fidgety. She might say something stupid. This way it is just us, the men of the family. We can handle the business. I can tell everyone she is sick, or that she is at a special academic program. It will make you look like a good father investing in her education. Blake's eyes lit up. He saw the angle. He saw the benefit. No brat to manage. No risk of her crying or complaining. Just him and the check. He smiled, a greedy, relieved smile. You know what, Alvin, he said. You are right. It is better. She would just be in the way. An academic program sounds great, very prestigious. He walked over to the desk and grabbed a pen. Did she leave the permission slip, he asked. I pulled a paper from my pocket. It was a form Isaac had drafted. It looked like a standard school form, but the fine print was legally binding. It gave retroactive permission for the trip and acknowledged that he was releasing her into my custody for the weekend. Right here, I said. Blake grabbed the paper. He did not read it. He did not even look at the header. He just scribbled his signature at the bottom. There, he said, handing it back. She is gone. Good riddance. Now we can focus on the party. He turned back to his suit. I folded the paper and put it in my pocket next to the dead plant photo and the camp brochure. It was the final piece of the puzzle. He had just signed away his daughter for a weekend of freedom. He had signed his own confession of negligence. I looked at his back. Enjoy your suit, Blake, I thought. It is the last nice thing you are ever going to wear. I shuffled toward the guest room. I am going to rest now, I said. Big day tomorrow. Huge day, Dad, Blake said, laughing. Huge day. I closed the door. I sat on the bed. I did not sleep. I waited for the sunrise. I waited for the storm. I told Blake I needed to sleep on the sofa in the living room that night. I claimed my knees were locking up from the damp weather, and I could not manage the stairs to the guest room again. It was a lie, of course. My knees were fine. I needed to be downstairs. I needed to be close to the door and close to the kitchen where they kept the liquor. I knew they would celebrate tonight. I knew they would get careless. Blake did not even pretend to care about my comfort. He tossed a thin blanket onto the couch and told me to keep quiet because he had important calls to make. He looked at me with a mixture of contempt and glee, like a man looking at a prize pig he was about to slaughter. He turned off the main lights, leaving me in the shadows of the room where my daughter used to play with her child. I arranged the pillows and lay down fully dressed. I kept my boots on. A railroad man never takes his boots off when he is on a job, and this was the most important job of my life. The house settled into silence for a brief moment. I stared at the ceiling, tracing the cracks in the plaster that Blake had never bothered to fix. This house used to be warm. It used to smell of baking bread and lemon polish. Now it smelled of neglect and expensive cologne. It was a tomb, and I was the ghost haunting it, waiting for the moment to manifest. Around 10 o'clock, the heavy oak door to the kitchen swung open. Light spilled into the hallway. I heard the distinct pop of a cork being pulled from a bottle. It was not just any bottle. I recognized the label from the glimpse I caught earlier. It was a Chateau Margaux, a vintage Tiana had bought for their 10th anniversary. She had saved for months to buy that wine, planning to drink it with him to celebrate a decade of love. Now he was drinking it with his mistress to celebrate selling her father down the river. I closed my eyes and slowed my breathing. I let my mouth hang open slightly, mimicking the deep sleep of the elderly. I heard footsteps approaching, high heels clicking on the hardwood, heavy boots following. They walked right past the living room archway. They did not even check to see if I was asleep. To them, I was already furniture. I was already gone. They settled at the kitchen island just out of my line of sight, but their voices carried perfectly in the empty house. To the easiest $500,000 we ever made, Blake said. I heard glasses clink. Cheers, baby, Courtney replied. Her voice was slurred. She had started drinking long before this bottle. You were amazing today, Blake. You played him like a fiddle. The way you cried in the kitchen, I almost believed you myself. Blake laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound. The old fool is desperate for affection. He has been alone since Tiana died. He misses being a father. I just gave him what he wanted. I let him feel important. I let him feel like the patriarch saving the day. It is pathetic, really. I lay rigid under the thin blanket. My hands were clenched into fists at my sides. Pathetic. He called me pathetic while he drank my wine and lived in my house. So what is the timeline? Courtney asked. Walk me through it again. I want to be sure. Blake took a long swallow of wine. Okay, listen close. Tomorrow night at the party, he signs the check. It is a cashier check, so it clears immediately. I deposit it via the mobile app right there at the table. Once I see the confirmation screen, the game is over. And then Courtney pressed. And then we celebrate, Blake said. We let him give his little speech. We let him feel like a king. Then we bring him back here. Sunday morning, first thing I call Dr. Evans. He is already on board. I told him Dad has been having violent episodes, that he is a danger to himself. Since we have the power of attorney paperwork he signed tonight, thinking it was the party contract, we can bypass the evaluation period. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. The papers I signed earlier. He had slipped something in. I had been so focused on the fake check I missed the real trap. But it did not matter. Isaac Rosen had prepared me for this. Any signature obtained under duress or fraud was void, but they did not know I knew that. We take him to Shady Acres by noon on Sunday, Blake continued. I already put down the deposit. It is cheap, Courtney. State subsidized. It smells like boiled cabbage and bleach, but it is secure. They have a lockdown ward for dementia patients. Once he is in there, he does not come out. No phone calls. No visitors. He just rots. Shady Acres. I knew the place. It was a warehouse for the forgotten. A place where people went to wait for death in soiled sheets. What if he fights back? Courtney asked. He seems strong for an old guy. Let him fight. Blake scoffed. Who are they going to believe? The grieving son trying to help his senile father, or the crazy old man ranting about conspiracies? I will tell them he thinks he is a railroad tycoon. I will tell them he hallucinates money. By the time he realizes what is happening, he will be sedated and strapped to a bed. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted copper. They had planned this down to the hour. They had a doctor in their pocket. They had a facility picked out. They were going to erase me. And the house, Courtney asked. Sold, Blake said. The cash buyer signs on Monday. We get the wire transfer Tuesday. We clear the debts, pay off the loan sharks, and we still have over $300,000 left plus the $500,000 from Alvin. That is $800,000, Courtney. We are rich. What about the brat? Courtney asked. Her voice was sharp with malice. Sophie, are you sure she is not going to be a problem? Blake sighed. The old man took her on that camping trip, which actually works out perfectly. When she comes back on Monday, the house will be sold. I will tell her Grandpa got sick and had to go to a hospital. I will tell her we have to move. I will put her on a plane to that boarding school in Switzerland Tiana always talked about. Or maybe just that camp in Utah if she acts up. It does not matter. She is out of the picture. She is 10 years old. She does what she is told. My heart hammered against my ribs. Switzerland. Utah. He did not even have a plan for her. He just wanted to discard her like he was discarding me. He talked about his own daughter like she was a piece of luggage he lost at the airport. We are going to Paris, baby, Blake said, his voice thick with lust and greed. First class. First. We are going to stay at the Ritz. We are going to forget this miserable winter and this miserable house. We are going to start over. Just you and me. Just you and me, Courtney echoed. To us. Glass clinked again. I heard the sound of a chair scraping back. I heard soft giggles and the wet sound of kissing. Let us go upstairs, Courtney whispered. The old man is out cold. Let us celebrate properly. They left the kitchen. I heard them stumbling up the stairs, laughing like hyenas. I heard the bedroom door slam shut. Silence returned to the house. But it was a different kind of silence now. It was the silence before an explosion. I sat up. I threw the blanket off. I did not feel old. I did not feel tired. I felt dangerous. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. The screen glowed bright in the darkness. My fingers hovered over the contacts list. I scrolled down to Isaac Rosen. I typed the message slowly, making sure every letter was correct. This was the signal we had agreed upon. The signal that meant there was no turning back. The signal that meant we were going nuclear. Activate protocol number 7, I typed. Tomorrow is their doomsday. I hit send. I watched the little icon spin and then disappear. Message delivered. Protocol 7. It was Isaac's code for a total legal and social demolition. It meant freezing assets. It meant serving warrants. It meant contacting the press. It meant unleashing the full force of the law and the truth simultaneously. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the street. The snow was falling softly, covering the grime of the city in a blanket of white. It looked peaceful. Upstairs, Blake and Courtney were sleeping in my daughter's bed, dreaming of Paris and millions. They thought they had won. They thought they were the predators. They did not know that the old man downstairs was not a sheep. I was the shepherd, and I had just called in the wolves. I checked my pocket again. The lighter was there. My old Zippo. I flipped it open and closed. Click, clack. The sound was comforting. I looked around the living room one last time. I memorized the stains on the carpet, the cracks in the ceiling, the ghost of Tiana standing by the fireplace, smiling at a future she would never see. I am doing this for you, baby girl, I whispered to the empty room. I am burning it all down so Sophie can rise from the ashes. I sat back down on the sofa. I did not close my eyes. I watched the clock on the wall. Tick, tick, tick. Every second brought Saturday closer. Every second brought the reckoning. I was ready. Let the party begin. Saturday night arrived, draped in the expensive scent of roasted prime rib and desperation. The venue Blake had chosen was called the Gilded Steer, a downtown steakhouse where the lighting was dim enough to hide the stains on your conscience, and the wine list was thick enough to be a weapon. It was exactly the kind of place a man like Blake Anderson thought successful people went. It was all velvet curtains, gold leaf trim, and waiters who looked at you with disdain if you did not order the sparkling water. I sat at the head table in a suit Blake had bought me from a discount rack that morning. It was polyester scratchy and 2 sizes too big. He wanted me to look small. He wanted me to look like a shriveled husk of a man who was barely holding on to reality. I played the part perfectly. I sat slumped in my chair, my mouth slightly open, my hands trembling as I reached for my water glass. I let a little water spill on my tie. Blake reached over and wiped it off with a napkin, his touch rough and impatient, but his smile for the room tight and bright. The room was packed. Blake had told me he invited friends and family. That was a lie. I looked out at the 40 or so faces illuminated by the crystal chandeliers, and I did not see a single friend. I saw creditors. I saw the sharks circling the boat waiting for the chum to hit the water. There were men in shiny suits with watches that were too big for their wrists. They laughed too loud and drank too fast. I recognized one of them from the description Isaac Rosen had given me of the local bookie, a man named Vinny, who had broken thumbs for less than what Blake owed. He was sitting near the front, his eyes fixed on Blake like a laser. There were other men too, men with nervous energy and shifting eyes, the investors Blake had scammed with his fake architectural projects. They were here because Blake had promised them a payout. He had told them all that his rich father-in-law was signing over a fortune tonight. They were not here to celebrate. They were here to collect. Blake was working the room like a politician on election night. He was sweating. I could see the sheen on his forehead even from where I sat. He was laughing, shaking hands, clapping men on the back. Just wait until the presentation, he kept saying, his voice booming a little too loud. Everything is settled. Big things are happening, boys. Big things. He was manic. He was terrified. He knew that if this check did not clear, if this performance failed, he would not leave this room with his kneecaps intact. He was dancing on the edge of a razor blade, and he thought I was his safety net. Courtney was playing the role of the gracious hostess. She was moving from table to table, pouring wine, flashing that predatory smile. She was wearing a red dress that was cut low and tight, a dress meant to distract. But my eyes were not on the dress. They were on her neck. Around her throat, resting against her pale skin, was a necklace. It was a delicate gold chain with a single emerald teardrop. My breath caught in my throat. My heart hammered a rhythm of pure rage against my ribs. I knew that necklace. I had bought it for Tiana when she graduated from college. It took me 6 months of overtime double shifts on the rail yard in the dead of winter to pay for it. Tiana had loved it. She wore it every day. She was wearing it in the last picture I ever took of her. Blake had told me it was lost. He told me the paramedics must have taken it when she died. He told me it was gone forever. He had lied. He had stolen it from his dead wife's body and given it to his mistress. And now she was wearing it at a party paid for with my money while planning to send me to an asylum. I gripped the handle of my cane under the table. I gripped it so hard the wood groaned. I wanted to stand up right then and tear it off her neck. I wanted to scream, but I forced myself to breathe. In, out. Just like the air brakes on a locomotive. Control the pressure. Hold the line. The moment was coming. Blake tapped his spoon against a champagne glass. The sharp ringing sound cut through the murmur of the room. The conversations died down. The sharks turned their eyes to the front. Vinny the bookie crossed his arms and leaned back, waiting. "Ladies and gentlemen," Blake announced, his voice trembling slightly before finding its stride. "Thank you all for coming tonight. This is a very special evening. A night of family, a night of legacy." He gestured toward me. I looked down at my plate, playing the confused old man. "You all know my father-in-law, Alvin Mercer," Blake continued. "He is a simple man, a railroad man. He worked hard his whole life. When my beautiful wife Tiana passed away 5 years ago, Alvin became a father to me. He stepped in. He supported us." He paused for effect, wiping a fake tear from his eye. Courtney moved to his side, placing a hand on his back, the emerald necklace glittering under the chandelier lights. "But time takes its toll on all of us. Blake said, his voice dropping to a somber register. Alvin has had some health struggles lately. His memory is not what it used to be. His finances, well, let us just say he has had some bad luck. But he has a good heart, and he wanted to do one last thing for his family. He wanted to ensure that his legacy, his hard-earned savings, went to the people who would protect it, who would use it to build a future for his granddaughter. He walked over to me and placed a hand on my shoulder. It felt heavy and hot. Alvin revealed to me this week that he has a significant trust, funds he saved for decades, and tonight he has decided to sign that trust over to me to manage for the family, to pay off our debts, to secure our future. He looked at the creditors in the room, making eye contact with them. So without further ado, I would like to invite my dad Alvin to say a few words and sign the transfer. The room erupted in polite applause. The sharks clapped slowly. They smelled blood. They smelled money. Blake pulled my chair out. He helped me stand up. I leaned heavily on the cane, my legs shaking. I let him guide me to the microphone stand in the center of the stage. The lights were bright. I blinked, confused. I looked at the crowd. I looked at Blake standing next to me, holding a large ceremonial check and a legal document on a clipboard. He held a pen out to me. "Just sign it, Dad," he whispered through his teeth, his smile fixed. "Just sign it, and we can go home." I looked at the pen. I looked at Courtney smirking in the background, touching Tiana's necklace. I looked at Vinny, the bookie, waiting for his payday. I reached out and took the microphone. My hand was trembling violently. The feedback squealed for a second, making everyone wince. I cleared my throat. It was a wet, raspy sound. I have a gift," I stammered into the mic, my voice weak and thready. Blake nodded encouragingly. "Yes, Dad. Tell them." "I have a gift," I repeated. And then I stopped shaking. I straightened my back. I felt the vertebrae click into place one by one. I grew 2 inches taller. I lifted my chin. I looked directly into the camera lens of the videographer Blake had hired. I let the cane slide from my other hand. It hit the wooden floor of the stage with a loud clatter that echoed through the silent room. Bam! I did not reach for it. I did not stumble. I stood there solid as an oak tie on the main line. Blake's smile faltered. He looked at the cane on the floor. He looked at me. Confusion clouded his eyes. I brought the microphone closer to my lips. When I spoke again, the rasp was gone. The weakness was gone. My voice was deep, resonant, and commanding. It was the voice that used to shout orders over the roar of diesel engines and screeching steel. It was the voice of a man who held the lives of others in his hands. "I have a gift." I boomed, my voice filling every corner of the room without a tremor. "But it is not money." The silence in the room changed. It went from anticipatory to confused. The air pressure dropped. The storm had arrived. Blake took a step toward me. "Dad, what are you doing?" he hissed. "Stick to the script." I turned to look at him. I did not look at him with love. I did not look at him with confusion. I looked at him with the cold, hard stare of a judge passing a death sentence. "Sit down, boy," I ordered, "and do not move." Blake froze. He had never heard me speak like that. He had never seen this Alvin. He looked at the crowd nervously. He laughed a nervous titter. "He is having an episode," Blake said to the room. "He gets confused." "I am not confused," I said, my voice cutting through his lies like a welding torch. "I have never been more clear in my life. You brought these people here to see a transfer of wealth. You brought them here to see you win." I reached into my jacket pocket. I did not pull out a check. I pulled out a remote control. A simple black clicker. I pointed it at the large projection screen behind us where a slideshow of stock photos of happy families had been playing. "But you forgot one thing, Blake," I said. "You forgot to check who was running the projector." I clicked the button. The screen went black for a second. Then a video started playing. It was grainy shot in low light, but the audio was crystal clear. It was the video from the night before. The video of Blake and Courtney sitting in my kitchen drinking my wine. The sound of their laughter filled the steakhouse. "The old fool is desperate for affection," Blake's voice boomed from the speakers. "It is pathetic, really." A gasp ran through the room. Blake's face went white. He turned to look at the screen. "Turn it off," he screamed, lunging for the laptop on the side table. But I was faster. I stepped in his path. "I am 68 years old, but I have spent my life lifting steel." I put a hand on his chest and shoved. He stumbled back, tripping over his own expensive shoes. He fell hard onto the stage floor. The video continued. "We take him to Shady Acres by noon on Sunday." Blake's voice continued. Once he is in there, he does not come out. No phone calls, no visitors, he just rots. Courtney let out a scream. She covered her mouth with her hands. The guests were standing up now. Chairs scraped against the floor. Vinny the bookie did not stand up. He just watched, his face unreadable. I clicked the remote again. The screen changed. Now it showed a bank statement. Highlighting transactions. Tuition payments that never went to the school. Withdrawals at casinos. Payments to luxury hotels. And then a picture of Sophie. A picture I took at the schoolyard. Sophie eating bread alone. Sophie with the torn shoes. "You see this?" I roared, pointing at the screen. This man stole $250,000 from his own daughter. He starved her. He dressed her in rags, and he planned to sell her to a camp in Utah so he could run away to Paris with his mistress. I pointed a finger at Courtney. "And you are wearing my dead daughter's necklace. The one you stole from her body." Courtney grabbed her throat, trying to hide the emerald. The crowd turned on her. I could feel the disgust radiating from them. Blake scrambled to his feet. He was red-faced, panting wild. "Lies," he shouted. "It is all lies. He is senile. He doctored the videos. He is crazy." "Crazy?" I asked, calm and cold. "Was I crazy when I found the poison in my soup, Courtney? Was I crazy when I tested it on the plant and watched it die?" I clicked the remote one last time. The photo of the dead, withered philodendron appeared on the screen next to the empty soup container. "Attempted murder," I said. "That is what this is. You tried to kill me to get the money faster." Blake looked at the crowd. He looked at the creditors. He saw no sympathy. He saw only anger. He saw his escape route closing. He lunged at me again. This time he had a steak knife in his hand that he had grabbed from a table. He was desperate. He was a cornered rat. "I will kill you, you old bastard," he screamed. He swung the knife. I did not flinch. I did not run. I caught his wrist in midair. My grip was iron. I twisted his arm back until I heard the snap of bone. He screamed and dropped the knife. I swept his legs out from under him with a kick that I learned in a bar fight in 1978. He hit the floor hard. I placed my heavy work boot on his chest, pinning him down. I leaned over him. The microphone was still in my hand. "You wanted a show, Blake," I said to him and to the whole room. "You wanted a party. Well, here it is." The doors to the private room burst open. Uniformed officers poured in. Isaac Rosen walked in behind them, looking grim and satisfied. "Happy anniversary," I whispered to Blake. The party was over. The reckoning had begun. The projection screen flickered again. I was not done. Not even close. Blake was pinned under my boot, struggling like a worm, but I wanted him to see this. I wanted everyone to see exactly what kind of monster was wearing that $5,000 suit. I pressed the button on the remote one more time. The image on the screen shifted from the bank statements to a video file. The audio crackled through the speakers, sharp and piercing. It was footage from the hidden camera Isaac and I had installed near the basement door of Blake's house just 2 days ago. The room went deathly silent. On the screen, Blake was dragging Sophie by her arm. She was crying, her little feet sliding on the hardwood floor. "Please, Daddy, no," she begged in the video. "It is dark down there. I promise I will be quiet." "Shut up!" Blake screamed on screen. His face was twisted in a mask of rage that made the guests in the steakhouse gasp. "You are just like your mother, always whining, always needing something. You want to eat? You earn it. Get in there." He threw her down the basement stairs, not a gentle push, a violent shove. The sound of her small body hitting the steps echoed through the restaurant speakers. Then came the slam of the door and the sound of the lock turning. The video cut to black, but the audio continued. We could hear Sophie sobbing in the dark, calling for her mother. I looked down at Blake. He had stopped struggling. He was staring at the screen, his face pale as a sheet. He knew there was no spinning this. There was no explaining away the brutality of throwing a 10-year-old child into a cellar. I clicked the remote again. A new image appeared. It was a spreadsheet, blown up so every person in the back of the room could read the numbers. It was a forensic accounting of the last 5 years. On the left side, the deposits. Alvin Mercer, $50,000. November 1st, 2019. November 1st, 2020. Every year. Regular as clockwork. On the right side, the withdrawals. St. Jude Academy, 0. Roof repair, 0. Medical bills? Zero. Instead, the lines were highlighted in red. Horseshoe Casino, $12,000. Gucci, $4,000. Ritz-Carlton, $6,000. Porsche lease payment. I pointed at the screen with the microphone. "Look at it," I commanded the room. "Look at where my granddaughter's future went. It did not go to books. It did not go to clothes. It went to a blackjack table in Hammond. It went to that bag hanging off his mistress's shoulder." I looked at Courtney. She was trembling, clutching the strap of her Hermes bag as if it were a lifeline. She tried to step back into the shadows, but the eyes of the room were on her. She was wearing the evidence. "You spent $40,000 on handbags in 1 year," I said, my voice cold, while my granddaughter walked to school in the snow with duct tape on her shoes. The murmur in the room grew into a roar. The creditors looked furious. They realized the money they were promised did not exist. The fake investors realized they had been played. The few actual neighbors who had been invited looked sick. Blake let out a roar of pure primal fury. The humiliation was too much. The exposure was absolute. He bucked under my foot, twisting his body with a desperation that gave him a surge of strength. He managed to free himself from my boot. He scrambled to his feet, his eyes wild, foam gathering at the corners of his mouth. "I am going to kill you," he screamed. "You ruined everything." He did not look for a weapon this time. He just charged. He lowered his shoulder and ran at me, intending to tackle me off the stage. I stood my ground. I did not move an inch. I spent 40 years bracing against the wind, hauling steel, locking down brakes on trains that weighed more than this entire building. I was made of iron and callous. He was made of soft hands and expensive lotion. He slammed into me. It was like a wave hitting a cliff. I barely rocked back. I dropped the microphone. I reached out with my left hand and grabbed him by the lapels of his suit jacket. I yanked him close, so close I could smell the fear and the cheap scotch on his breath. "You think you are a man?" I growled in his face. "You think you are tough because you can beat a little girl?" I let go of his jacket with one hand. I drew my right hand back. It was a hand that had swung sledgehammers, a hand that had tightened bolts in sub-zero temperatures. It was a slab of granite. I swung. My open palm connected with the side of his face. The sound was like a gunshot. It was the sound of justice. Blake spun in the air. His feet left the ground. He crashed onto the stage floor, sliding across the polished wood until he hit the podium. He lay there, dazed, blood trickling from his lip. He tried to push himself up, but his arms shook. He looked at me with terror. He finally realized that the old man he had mocked, the old man he had planned to discard, was the most dangerous thing he had ever encountered. "Stay down," I said. Just then, the doors to the banquet hall swung open with force. This time, it was not waiter service. "Police! Everybody stay where you are!" 6 officers marched into the room, their hands on their holsters. Behind them walked Isaac Rosen. He was holding a leather folder. He looked at Blake on the floor, then at me. He gave a single, sharp nod. The officers swarmed the stage. They hauled Blake to his feet. He was groggy, his cheeks swelling rapidly where I had hit him. He looked around the room, searching for an ally, searching for a way out. He found neither. 2 officers grabbed his arms and spun him around. The click of handcuffs was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. Isaac stepped forward. He opened the folder and pulled out a document stamped with the seal of the Cook County Court. His voice was calm, professional, and loud enough to be heard over the murmurs of the crowd. "Blake Anderson," he read. "You are under arrest pursuant to an emergency warrant issued this evening." Blake struggled against the cuffs. "On what charges?" he spat, blood spraying from his mouth. "This is assault. That old man attacked me." Isaac ignored him. He continued reading from the list. Charge 1. Attempted causing of great bodily harm to a vulnerable person. Charge 2. Wire fraud. Charge 3. Embezzlement. Charge 4. Identity theft. Isaac paused. He looked over the rim of his glasses at Blake. And Charge 5. Aggravated child abuse and child endangerment. The room erupted. People were shouting. Some were taking photos. Vinny the bookie stood up near the front, shook his head in disgust, and walked out the back door. He knew he wasn't getting paid, and he knew Blake was done. Blake's face crumpled. The reality of the list hit him. These were not white-collar crimes he could pay a fine for. These were felonies. These were prison time. "I did not do it," he screamed, thrashing against the officers. "It is a lie. That video is fake. He is setting me up. Officer, grab the woman, I said, pointing to Courtney. Courtney was trying to edge toward the kitchen door. She had taken off the emerald necklace and was trying to stuff it into her purse. An officer intercepted her. Ma'am, stop right there. I did not do anything, she shrieked. I am just a guest. I do not know what is going on. She is an accomplice, I said firmly. She falsified documents. She used stolen credit cards, and she is in possession of stolen property. That necklace belongs to the estate of Tiana Mercer. The officer grabbed her purse. He pulled out the necklace. He looked at it, then at Courtney. You are coming with us too, ma'am. They cuffed her. She started crying, her mascara running down her face in black streaks. It was all his idea, she wailed, pointing at Blake. He told me he had the money. He told me the old man was dying. I watched them being dragged out. Blake was still screaming threats. Courtney was sobbing excuses. The guests watched them go, their faces a mixture of shock and satisfaction. The room quieted down as the police sirens faded into the distance. I stood alone on the stage. My hands stung from the slap, a dull throb that felt like victory. Isaac walked up to me. He put a hand on my shoulder. It is done, Alvin, he said softly. They are in custody. Sophie is safe. I looked at the empty doorway where my son-in-law had just been dragged out. I looked at the screen behind me, now frozen on the picture of the dead plant. Not yet, I said. We got the small fish, but there is one more thing. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the insurance policy papers I had retrieved from my safety deposit box that morning. He thinks he is going away for fraud, I said. He thinks he can plea bargain. He thinks this is just about money. I looked Isaac in the eye. Wait until he finds out about the life insurance, I said. Wait until he finds out he tried to rob a ghost. Isaac smiled, a shark-like smile. Let us go to the station, Alvin. I think the detectives are going to want to see that. I picked up my cane from the floor. I did not lean on it. I carried it like a scepter. I walked off the stage, through the crowd of stunned, silent people. I walked out into the cold Chicago night. The air tasted clean. It tasted like snow and diesel and retribution. I had broken him. But I was not finished. I was going to bury him. The interrogation room at the precinct was cold and smelled of stale coffee and desperation. It was a small concrete box with a single metal table bolted to the floor. On one side of the table sat Blake Anderson, still wearing his ruined suit from the party. His tie was loose and there was a bruise forming on his cheek where I had hit him. His hands were cuffed to the table bar. I stood on the other side of the one-way glass watching him. Isaac Rosen stood next to me along with Detective Johnson and a federal agent named Miller who had arrived 20 minutes ago. Blake was not acting like a man who had been caught. He was acting like a man who had been inconvenienced. He was yelling at the empty room, demanding a lawyer, demanding a phone call, demanding to speak to the captain. He still believed his own lies. He still believed that his charm and his white skin and his expensive suit would get him out of this. He thought this was just a misunderstanding, a family dispute that got out of hand. He does not get it, Isaac said quietly. He thinks he is going to walk. He is not walking anywhere, I said. I pushed open the heavy steel door and stepped inside the room. Isaac followed me carrying a thick file. Blake looked up. His eyes narrowed when he saw me. He leaned forward, straining against the cuffs. He spat. You are dead, old man. Do you hear me? Dead. I am going to sue you for assault. I am going to sue you for kidnapping. I am going to take everything you have. You made a big mistake tonight, Alvin. You humiliated me in front of my investors. I pulled out a metal chair and sat down slowly. I placed my cane on the table. It made a heavy thud. Your investors are gone. Blake, I said, my voice calm. They gave statements to the police before they left. They told the officers exactly how much money you took from them for projects that never existed. Vinny the bookie is probably halfway to Mexico by now, but the rest of them are singing like birds. Blake laughed. It was a nervous sound. So what he said. Business deals go bad. That is civil court, Alvin, not criminal. You cannot keep me here for bad debt. And the abuse charges. Please, I disciplined my daughter. A father has a right to discipline his child. No judge is going to convict me for that. I will get a slap on the wrist and I will be out by morning, and when I get out I am coming for you. He was so confident, so arrogant. He really thought the system was built to protect men like him. You are forgetting something, I said. What? Blake sneered. The fraud. My lawyer will tear that apart. You signed those checks willingly, Alvin. You gave me that money. It was a gift. There is no law against being a bad son-in-law. I leaned forward. I looked him deep in the eyes. I wanted him to see the truth before I crushed him with it. I am not talking about my money, Blake, I said. I am talking about Tiana. Blake blinked. For the first time his confidence wavered. He licked his lips. What about her? He asked. She is dead. Let her rest. You never let her rest, I said. You spent 5 years spending her memory. You spent 5 years using her name to get sympathy and cash. You told me her life insurance lapsed. You told me there was no money left. Blake shrugged. Because there was not. She forgot to pay the premium. It happens. Tragic, really. $2 million gone because she was too busy working to pay a bill. I reached out and took the file from Isaac. I opened it. On top was a copy of a policy document from Prudential Life Insurance. She did not forget Blake, I said. She paid every single month. She was a logistics manager. She never missed a payment in her life. The policy was active the day she died. $2 million. Blake's face went still. He stared at the file. So what? He said, his voice tight. If it was active, then the insurance company screwed me. They told me there was an investigation. They dragged it out. That is why I never got the check. Liar, I said. You never got the check because you were not the beneficiary. The room went silent. The air conditioning hummed. What are you talking about? Blake whispered. I am her husband. I am the primary beneficiary. It is automatic. It was automatic, I corrected him. Until 1 week before she died. I pulled out a document. It was a change of beneficiary form dated 5 years ago. It had Tiana's signature at the bottom. Bold and clear. Tiana was not stupid, Blake, I said. She knew you were cheating on her. She found the texts. She found the hotel receipts. She knew you were draining the bank accounts. She was planning to leave you. She told me she was working extra shifts to save for a divorce lawyer. Blake shook his head. No. She loved me. She worked for us. She worked for Sophie, I snapped. And because she knew you, she knew she had to protect her daughter. 1 week before the aneurysm, she went to the insurance office on her lunch break. She removed you from the policy, Blake. She made Sophie the sole beneficiary. And she named me as the trustee until Sophie turns 21. Blake's face turned a sickly shade of gray. He slumped back in his chair. You knew, he whispered. You knew the whole time. I did not know, I admitted. Not until yesterday. When I went to the bank to pull my records, Isaac had his team run a search on Tiana's assets. We found the policy, and we found the trust. I leaned closer. But here is the interesting part, Blake. The insurance company told us something else. They told us that 3 days after Tiana died, they received a claim form. A form demanding an immediate payout. Blake looked away. He started to sweat. And they received another form, I continued. A request for reinstatement of original beneficiary. It was dated 2 days before her death. It claimed Tiana had made a mistake and wanted to put you back on the policy. It had her signature on it. So she changed her mind, Blake said, his voice trembling. She realized she made a mistake. She loved me, Alvin. She wanted me to have the money. Isaac stepped forward. He placed a clear plastic evidence bag on the table. Inside was the document Blake was talking about. This document, Isaac said, his voice professional and sharp, was analyzed by a forensic handwriting expert this morning. The signature looks like Tiana's. It is a very good copy. But the ink, Blake. The ink was the problem. What about the ink? Blake croaked. It is a specific type of gel ink, Isaac explained. Manufactured by a company that did not release that specific formula until 6 months after Tiana died. I watched the realization hit him. It was like watching a building collapse. The foundation gave way, and the whole structure came down. You forged her signature, I said. You waited until she was cold in the ground, and then you forged a document to try and steal $2 million from your own daughter. You tried to rob the dead Blake. I did not, Blake stammered. I did not know. It must be a mistake. It is not a mistake, I said. It is a felony. A federal felony. Insurance fraud. Wire fraud because you submitted it electronically. And identity theft of a deceased person. Isaac opened the door and signaled to the federal agent outside. Agent Miller walked in. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my truck, and he looked like he ate guys like Blake for breakfast. Blake Anderson, Agent Miller said. You are under arrest for federal insurance fraud and forgery. We also have evidence that you forged Alvin Mercer's signature on a loan application last year. Blake looked at me. His eyes were wide and terrified. The arrogance was gone. The entitlement was gone. All that was left was a scared little boy who got caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Only the cookie jar was worth $2 million, and the penalty was 20 years in a federal penitentiary. "Alvin, please," he begged, tears streaming down his face. "Please do not let them take me. I will pay it back. I will work. I will do anything. Think of Sophie. She needs her father." "Sophie has a father," I said, standing up and picking up my cane. "Me. You are just the sperm donor who tried to sell her to a camp in Utah." I turned my back on him. "Wait!" Blake screamed. "Wait, Alvin. We can make a deal. I know things. I know people. You know nothing," I said without looking back. I walked out of the interrogation room. I heard him screaming my name until the heavy steel door slammed shut, cutting off the sound. I stood in the hallway. I took a deep breath. My hands were shaking again, but this time it was from adrenaline leaving my body. It was over. The lie was exposed. The money was safe. Isaac put a hand on my shoulder. "You did good, Alvin," he said. "Tiana would be proud." I looked at the closed door. She knew I whispered. She knew he was a snake, and she left me the weapon to kill him. I just had to find it. "Let us go," Isaac said. "Sophie is waiting." We walked out of the police station. It was snowing again. Big, soft flakes that covered the dirty city streets. I felt lighter than I had in 5 years. I had justice. But I was not done yet. I still had to make sure he stayed in that cage. And I had one final deal to make with him. A deal that would set Sophie free forever. I got into my truck. I did not go to the hotel. I went to Isaac's house. I needed to see my granddaughter. I needed to tell her that the bad man was gone and he was never coming back. But as I drove, I kept thinking about Blake's face when I mentioned the forgery. He was broken. But a broken snake can still bite. I needed to pull its fangs out completely. I needed full custody. And I knew exactly how to get it. The prison visit was next. And I was going to bring a pen. The visiting room at Cook County Jail was a box of gray concrete and despair. It smelled of industrial cleaner and the sweat of men who knew they were never going home. I sat on a metal stool bolted to the floor, my hands resting on the cold steel counter. On the other side of the thick plexiglass partition sat Blake Anderson. It had been 7 days since the night at the steakhouse. 7 days since I had slapped the arrogance off his face. The man sitting opposite me now bore little resemblance to the architect who drove a Range Rover. His head was shaved. He was wearing a bright orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. His face was a map of misery. One eye was swollen shut, a souvenir from his new roommates who did not take kindly to child abusers. His lip was split and his hands were shaking uncontrollably as he reached for the black phone receiver on the wall. I picked up my side of the line. I did not say a word. I just watched him. "Alvin," he croaked. His voice was thin and broken. "Thank God you came. You have to help me. You have to get me out of here." I looked at him with the same detached interest I used to have for a broken engine part. "You are exactly where you belong, Blake," I said calmly. "No, Alvin, please," he begged, tears cutting tracks through the grime on his face. "It is a nightmare in here. They know what I am charged with. They know about Sophie. I have not slept in 3 days. I have to pay for protection with my food tray. Please, Alvin. I am family." "Family," I repeated, tasting the word. "You tried to poison me, Blake. You threw your daughter down a flight of stairs. You are not family. You are a disease we finally cured." Blake leaned forward, pressing his forehead against the glass. "I am sorry," he sobbed. "I am so sorry. I lost my way. The gambling, the debts. I was desperate. I did not mean to hurt anyone. I just wanted to fix it. I can fix it, Alvin. If you drop the charges, if you tell them it was a misunderstanding, I can pay you back. I can work. I will do anything." I listened to him beg. I listened to the same voice that had mocked me in my own kitchen just a week ago. "Drop the charges," I asked. "These are federal charges, Blake. The FBI does not drop charges because you said sorry. You forged federal documents. You committed wire fraud. You crossed lines you cannot uncross." "But you can help me," he insisted, his eyes wild with panic. "You can tell them you gave me permission. You can tell them I was authorized to sign Tiana's name. If you say it, they might believe you. You are the victim. If the victim recants, the case falls apart." He still thought he could manipulate me. He still thought I was the old fool who would do anything to keep the peace. I leaned in close to the glass. My breath fogged the surface. Why would I do that, Blake? Give me one reason why I should save you. Because I am a human being, he wailed. Because everyone deserves a second chance. Because God teaches forgiveness, Alvin. You are a religious man. You go to church. How can you call yourself a Christian if you let me rot in here? I looked at him. I thought about the Bible verse Tiana used to love. Justice rolls down like waters. I am not God, I said, my voice dropping to a growl that vibrated through the glass. I do not have the power to forgive sins. And I definitely do not have the desire. I am just a grandfather. And my job is not to forgive wolves. It is to shoot them. Blake recoiled as if I had hit him again. He slumped back in his chair, defeated. Then why are you here, he whispered. If you are not going to help me, why did you come? To laugh. To watch me bleed. I reached into the inside pocket of my work jacket. I pulled out a single sheet of crisp white paper. I unfolded it and pressed it against the glass so he could read the bold black text. Voluntary relinquishment of parental rights. I am here to make a deal, I said. Blake read the document. His eyes darted back and forth. You want Sophie, he said. She is already mine, I corrected him. Isaac filed the emergency custody order last week. You will never see her again regardless of what you sign. But this paper makes it permanent. It scrubs your name from her life. It means you can never contact her. You can never claim her. You can never make a dime off her story. Why should I sign it? Blake asked, a flicker of his old greed returning. What do I get? I pulled the paper back. You get a choice, I said. Right now, the district attorney is looking at your file. He sees a child abuser and a fraudster. He wants to make an example of you. He is pushing for federal prison, maximum security, 25 years with no parole. That is a hard place, Blake. That is where they send the guys who never come back. Blake shuddered. But I continued, if you sign this paper right now, if you give Sophie her freedom voluntarily, I will make a call. I will tell the DA that for the sake of the child, to spare her the trauma of testifying in court, we would accept a plea deal. What kind of deal, Blake asked. State prison, I said. Medium security. Downstate. It is closer to home. The food is better. And you might be eligible for parole in 15 years instead of 25. I watched him do the math. He was weighing his daughter against 10 years of his life. He was weighing fatherhood against better food and a softer mattress. It took him less than 10 seconds. 15 years, he asked. Maybe less with good behavior, I lied. But you have to sign now. If you walk out of this room without signing, the deal is off. I will hire a private prosecutor to assist the state. I will make sure Sophie takes the stand and tells the jury exactly how cold that basement was. And I will make sure you go to the federal pen where the other inmates are waiting for fresh meat. Blake looked at the guard standing by the door. He looked at the orange jumpsuit. He looked at his shaking hands. Give me the pen, he said. I slid the document and a cheap plastic pen through the slot at the bottom of the window. Blake grabbed it. He did not hesitate. He did not ask about Sophie's welfare. He did not ask to send a message. He just scribbled his signature on the line. Blake Anderson. He slid the paper back to me. There, he said. She is yours. Now make the call. Get me the deal. I picked up the paper. I checked the signature. It was valid. It was over. Sophie was legally safe from him forever. I folded the paper carefully and put it back in my pocket next to my heart. I stood up. I will talk to Isaac, I said. Wait, Blake shouted as I turned to leave. You promise right. State prison, 15 years. I looked at him one last time. I looked at the man who had killed my daughter and tortured my granddaughter. I promise I will talk to them, I said. I did not promise they would listen. I turned and walked out of the visiting room. I heard Blake screaming behind the glass. He was screaming that I was a liar. He was screaming that I tricked him. He was right. I walked through the metal detectors and out into the gray Chicago afternoon. I took a deep breath of cold air. I was going to give the paper to Isaac. We were going to file it immediately. But I was not going to ask for a plea deal. I was not going to ask for leniency. I was going to let the district attorney throw the entire library at him. I lied to a liar. I cheated a cheater. And I slept like a baby that night. Sophie was safe. The monster was in a cage. And I had the key in my pocket. My work here was done. The day of the trial finally arrived and the courtroom felt heavy with the weight of impending judgment. It smelled of floor wax and old wood and the nervous sweat of the guilty. I sat in the front row right behind the prosecutor's table. I wore my Sunday best suit, the one I usually save for church and funerals. My hands rested on my knees, steady and calm. I was not there to fight anymore. I was there to witness. On the other side of the aisle, Blake Anderson and Courtney sat in their orange jumpsuits. They looked small. The arrogance that had defined them for years was gone, stripped away by weeks in county jail. Blake had lost weight. His skin was sallow and his head was shaved. He refused to look at the gallery. He stared at the table, his shoulders hunched as if he expected a blow to land at any moment. Courtney looked even worse. Her roots were showing dark against the blonde dye, and without her expensive makeup she looked plain and terrified. She kept glancing at the door as if hoping someone would run in and save her. The bailiff called the court to order. The judge, a stern woman with glasses that magnified her sharp eyes, took the bench. The jury filed in. 12 ordinary people who were about to hear a story of extraordinary cruelty. I watched their faces. They looked serious. They looked ready. Then the side door opened. The room went quiet. The prosecutor stood up. "The state calls Sophie Anderson to the stand." My heart swelled in my chest. Sophie walked in. She was not the ragged, starving child I had found in that schoolyard. She was wearing a navy blue dress with a white collar, a dress I had bought her. Her hair was braided neatly. She held the hand of a court-appointed advocate, a kind woman named Mrs. Higgins. But she walked with her head held high. She climbed into the witness chair. Her feet did not quite touch the floor. She looked tiny in that big wooden box surrounded by adults and laws and consequences. But she did not look scared. She looked like iron. She looked like me. The judge leaned down and spoke to her gently, asking if she knew the difference between the truth and a lie. "Yes, Ma, am," Sophie said, her voice clear and bell-like in the silent room. "A lie is what my father does. The truth is what sets you free. That is what my grandpa told me." The judge smiled sadly. "That is a very wise grandpa you have. Please tell us the truth today, Sophie." The prosecutor approached the stand. He was gentle with her. He asked her easy questions first. Her name, her age, where she went to school. Then he moved to the hard part. "Sophie, can you tell the jury what happened in your house after your grandfather would leave?" I held my breath. I wanted to run up there and shield her. I wanted to cover her ears. But I knew she had to do this. She had to slay the dragon herself. Sophie folded her hands in her lap. She looked directly at the jury. She did not look at Blake. She acted as if he was not even in the room. When Grandpa left, Daddy would get angry, she started. She spoke in a flat, matter-of-fact tone that was more terrifying than any tears. He would say that Grandpa was a stupid old man who did not know anything. He would take the money Grandpa gave him and put it in his safe. Then he would tell me to go to my room. "And did you go to your room?" the prosecutor asked. "Sometimes," Sophie said. "But usually he put me in the basement." The jury shifted in their seats. A woman in the back row put a hand to her mouth. "Why did he put you in the basement, Sophie?" "Because I cost too much money," she said simply. "He said food costs money. He said clothes cost money. He said if I was going to be a burden, I had to stay out of sight. He said looking at me made him sick because I looked like my mother." I saw the jurors' faces harden. They looked at Blake with pure loathing. Blake sank lower in his chair, trying to make himself disappear. "What was it like in the basement?" the prosecutor asked softly. "It was cold," Sophie said. "There were no lights. There was a mattress on the floor, but it was wet sometimes. There were spiders. I used to be scared of them, but then I gave them names. It helped me not to feel so lonely." She did not cry. She did not tremble. She described the cold, damp hell she had lived in with the same casual tone another child might use to describe a playground. That detachment, that absolute normalization of abuse was what broke the hearts of everyone in the room. "Did he feed you while you were down there?" sometimes Sophie said. "If I was quiet. If I cried, he would leave me down there all night without dinner. He said hunger would teach me gratitude." "And did he ever threaten you?" Sophie nodded. "Yes. He told me that if I ever told Grandpa about the basement or the money or the school, he would kill Mr. Whiskers. That is my cat. He said he would put him in a bag and throw him in the river. And he said he would send me to a bad place in Utah where they fix broken children." The defense attorney stood up to cross-examine her. He was a slick man with a shiny suit paid for by the last of Blake's dwindling assets. He tried to smile at Sophie, but it looked like a snarl. "Sophie," he said, his voice dripping with false condescension, "are you sure you are not exaggerating? Kids have active imaginations. Maybe your dad just gave you a timeout." Sophie looked at him. She tilted her head to the side, studying him like a bug under a microscope. "A timeout is 5 minutes," she said. "A timeout is in the corner. A timeout does not last for 2 days in the dark without water. A timeout does not leave bruises on your arms." She pulled up the sleeve of her dress. The bruises were fading now, turning yellow and brown, but they were still there. The map of her father's love. The defense attorney paused. He looked at the jury. He saw their faces. He knew he had lost. "I have no further questions," he mumbled and sat down. Sophie climbed down from the chair. She walked back to the advocate. She did not look at Blake once. She erased him from her world as completely as he had tried to erase her. The rest of the trial was a blur of technicalities. Isaac presented the financial records. Agent Miller testified about the forged documents. The video of the abuse was played. But nothing hit harder than the voice of that little girl describing the spiders in the dark. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When they came back, they did not look at the defendants. The foreman stood up. "We find the defendant Blake Anderson guilty on all counts. We find the defendant Courtney Miller guilty on all counts." The judge did not waste time with sentencing. She looked at Blake with eyes of ice. "Mr. Anderson," she said, "you preyed on the vulnerable, you stole from the elderly, you tortured your own child, you are a predator of the worst kind." She sentenced him to 25 years in federal prison for the fraud and the abuse, no parole. She sentenced Courtney to 10 years for conspiracy and accomplice to abuse. Blake screamed when the gavel came down. He started shouting that it was unfair, that I had tricked him, that I had promised him a deal. "You promised Alvin," he yelled as the bailiffs grabbed him. "You said 15 years state prison. You said you would talk to them." I stood up slowly. I leaned on my cane just for show. "I lied, Blake," I said, my voice carrying over the commotion. "Just like you lied about the roof. Just like you lied about the school. Just like you lied about loving my daughter." They dragged him away, kicking and screaming. He looked at me one last time, his eyes full of hate, and I looked back with nothing but cold indifference. Courtney was sobbing loudly, begging for mercy as she was led out in handcuffs. The courtroom emptied out. The show was over. The justice system had done its job. I walked over to where Sophie was sitting on a bench in the hallway, swinging her legs. She was looking at a comic book. "Hey, baby girl," I said. She looked up. "Is it done, Grandpa?" "It is done," I said. "He is gone. He cannot hurt you anymore. Not ever." She nodded. She closed the comic book. She did not smile. She did not cheer. She just looked relieved, like a soldier who had finally been told the war was over. She slid off the bench and took my hand. Her hand was small and warm in mine. "Can we go home now?" she asked, looking up at me with those big dark eyes. "I am hungry. Can we get ice cream?" I felt a lump in my throat the size of a coal. After everything she had been through, after the testimony, after seeing her father dragged away in chains, all she wanted was home. All she wanted was ice cream. "Yes, baby," I said, squeezing her hand. "We can go home, and you can have all the ice cream you want." We walked out of the courthouse together, into the bright afternoon sun. The nightmare was behind us. The long, dark tunnel was over. We got into my truck. I buckled her in. "What kind of ice cream?" I asked, starting the engine. "Chocolate," she said, "with sprinkles." "You got it," I said. I pulled out into traffic, leaving the courthouse in the rearview mirror. I did not look back. I looked forward at the road ahead, at the little girl sitting next to me. We had a lot of healing to do. We had a lot of lost time to make up for, but we were free. And as I drove, I knew that Tiana was watching us. I knew she was smiling. "We won, baby girl," I whispered to the wind. We won. It has been exactly 1 year since the gavel fell and the heavy steel doors slammed shut behind Blake Anderson. The Chicago winter has returned, wrapping the city in a blanket of gray ice and biting wind, but inside our new home the air is warm and smells of roasted chicken and rosemary. We do not live in the old bungalow anymore. I sold it 2 months after the trial. There were too many ghosts in the walls, too many memories of a life that did not exist anymore. We bought a sturdy brick ranch house in a quiet neighborhood near the lake. It has a big yard with a fence high enough to keep the world out, and a garden where Sophie and I planted tulips that are sleeping under the snow, waiting for spring. Sophie is in the kitchen, setting the table. She is humming a song she learned in the school choir. If you saw her now, you would not recognize the hollow-eyed child shivering in the cemetery. She has grown 3 inches. Her cheeks are round and full, the color of warm cocoa. She wears clothes that fit her clothes that are clean and warm. She has a winter coat that is thick enough to stop a blizzard. We bought it together, and she picked out the bright purple color because she said she wanted to be seen. She never wants to be invisible again. She still sees a therapist twice a week, a kind woman named Dr. Patel. At first, Sophie would sit in the office and stare at the floor, twisting her hands in her lap. But slowly the words started to come. She talked about the dark. She talked about the hunger. She talked about the way her father looked at her like she was a stain on his expensive rug. The nightmares still come sometimes. I hear her cry out in the night, and I go to her room. I sit by her bed and hold her hand until her breathing steadies. But the nightmares are getting fewer and farther between. The shadows are retreating, chased away by the light of a safe home and a grandfather who would tear the world apart to keep her safe. I watch her place the forks and knives with careful precision. She is meticulous, she likes order, but she also likes to laugh. She has friends now, real friends who come over for sleepovers and eat popcorn on the living room rug. I watch them play and I feel a tightness in my chest loosen just a little bit more every day. The train is back on the tracks. It is moving slow, but it is moving forward. The money from Tiana's life insurance policy, the $2 million that Blake tried to steal, sits in a trust for Sophie. It is locked down tight, managed by Isaac Rosen's firm. It will pay for her college. It will pay for her first house. It will pay for her freedom. But there was other money too. The money from the sale of Blake's assets, the money recovered from the frozen accounts, the restitution the court ordered him to pay. It was a significant sum. Blood money. I did not want to spend a dime of it on myself. I have my pension. I have my savings. I have enough. So I did what Tiana would have wanted. I put that money to work. I drive my truck down to the south side 3 days a week to a building that used to be a derelict warehouse. Now it has a fresh coat of paint and a sign above the door that reads the Tiana Mercer Center for Child Advocacy. It is not a big place, but it is a fortress. We hired lawyers. We hired social workers. We hired investigators like the one who helped me find the truth about Blake. The mission is simple. We help children who are trapped. We help grandparents and relatives who suspect abuse but do not have the resources to fight back against a system that often prioritizes biological parents over the safety of the child. We provide legal counsel. We provide emergency housing. We provide the kind of investigation that the police are often too busy or too bound by red tape to conduct. Just last week, we helped a grandmother in Bronzeville get emergency custody of her 3 grandsons who were being neglected by a father addicted to gambling. I sat in the back of the courtroom and watched the judge sign the order. I saw the look of relief on that woman's face, the way her shoulders dropped 2 inches as the weight of the world was lifted off her. It was the same feeling I had the day I drove away from the courthouse with Sophie. It is hard work. It is heartbreaking work. I see the bruises. I see the hungry eyes. I hear the stories that would make a grown man weep. But every time we win a case, every time we pull a child out of the darkness, I feel Tiana with me. I feel her hand on my shoulder telling me that this is what she died for. Her legacy is not the tragedy of her death. Her legacy is the safety of these children. I was in my office at the center yesterday going over the monthly budget when the mail arrived. The receptionist brought in a stack of envelopes. Most of it was bills or donation checks. But at the bottom of the pile, there was a plain white envelope. It looked dirty, like it had passed through 100 hands. The return address was stamped in red ink, Illinois Department of Corrections. I knew who it was before I saw the name. Blake Anderson, inmate number 74,922. I sat there staring at the envelope for a long time. My hand did not shake. My heart did not race. I felt nothing. No anger, no fear, just a cold, hollow indifference. It was like looking at a dead bug on the windshield. I opened it. The letter was written on lined paper in pencil. The handwriting was jagged and desperate. Dear Alvin, it read, I hope you are happy. It is hell in here. The food is slop. The mattress is like concrete. I have a toothache that won't go away. They charge $5 for a tube of toothpaste at the commissary. I have no money on my books. No one visits me. My lawyer quit. Please, Alvin, I know you hate me, but have some mercy. Send me $50. Just 50. So I can buy toothpaste and soap. I am rotting in here. Please, for the sake of the past. Blake. I read it twice. I imagined him sitting in his cell, his expensive suits gone, his arrogance stripped away, begging for toothpaste. I imagined the man who spent $40,000 on handbags for his mistress asking for $50 for soap. I opened my desk drawer. I took out a crisp $1 bill, just one. I took a black marker. I smoothed the dollar bill out on the desk. On the face of George Washington, right across the green ink, I wrote 4 words in bold block letters: your true value. I folded the dollar bill. I did not write a letter. I did not offer words of forgiveness or condemnation. He did not deserve my words. He did not deserve my energy. He was a bad memory fading in the rearview mirror. I put the dollar in a fresh envelope. I addressed it to inmate 74922. I put a stamp on it and dropped it in the outgoing mail bin. It was the last thing I would ever give him. I left the center and drove home. The snow was falling harder now, covering the city in silence. I pulled into my driveway and saw the lights of the house glowing warm and welcoming against the dark. I saw Sophie's silhouette in the window. She was waiting for me. I walked inside, stomping the snow off my boots. The smell of dinner filled the air. Sophie ran into the hallway. "Grandpa, you are home," she said. "Wash your hands. The potatoes are ready." I washed my hands, scrubbing away the grime of the day, scrubbing away the memory of the letter. I walked into the dining room. We sat down at the table, just the two of us. We held hands and bowed our heads. We said grace, thanking God for the food, for the warmth, for the safety. We did not ask for anything else. We had everything we needed. "So tell me about school," I said, picking up my fork. Sophie launched into a story about her science project. She was building a model of the solar system. She needed help with the rings of Saturn. Her eyes were bright and alive. She laughed when she told me about a joke her friend told her. We ate, we talked, we laughed. We did not mention Blake. We never mentioned him. His name was not spoken in this house. He was a ghost, exorcised and banished to the concrete box he deserved. I looked at my granddaughter. I looked at the life we had built from the wreckage. I thought about the $50,000 a year I used to pay for a lie. It was a high price. But looking at her now safe and happy and whole, I knew I would have paid $1 million. I would have paid everything. People say blood is thicker than water, but I learned that love is thicker than blood. Love is action. Love is protection. Love is a railroad man stopping a train to save a child on the tracks. I took a bite of potatoes. They were perfect. "We are okay, Sophie," I said softly. She smiled at me, a real smile that reached her eyes. "I know, Grandpa," she said. "We are home." And outside the wind howled, but inside the fire was warm and the monsters were gone forever. Looking back, I realized that for 5 years, I paid a heavy price for my silence. I thought writing a check was enough to be a grandfather, but I was wrong. True family isn't defined by DNA or marriage certificates. It is defined by who stands in the rain to keep you dry. Blake had the title of father, but he was a stranger to the meaning of love. I learned that evil often hides behind a charming smile and a nice suit, and that the most dangerous thing you can do is look away when your gut tells you something is wrong. Trust your instincts, check on your loved ones, and never be afraid to burn down a bridge if it is the only way to save a child. If you believe justice was served for Sophie, hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more stories of truth and retribution. Let me know in the comments. Would you have offered Blake a plea deal or let him rot?